What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I am Mike, and you are watching the biggest board gaming end-of-year tier list that has ever been made in human history. I think. I don't know. Don't fact check me on that. I'm pretty sure it's the biggest, but, I don't want to be called a liar. I have spent almost an entire year going through the hottest games, making sure I get them all played just so I can make this end-of-year tier list video. And we're sitting at something like 80 games. We have a ton of stuff to get through. But before we begin, I have always had an issue with content creators sort of burying the fact that these games have been provided for them. Instead of just putting it in the description box or, briefly mentioning it at the start or having YouTube mention it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this graphic over top of the box so that the entire time I'm talking about the game, you know that it was provided to me by the publishers. I figured it's just best to be the change you want to see. So this is going to be a long video, so we better just get started. So first up is Galactic Cruise. Galactic Cruise is a heavy economic euro where players manage rival space tourism companies, build ships, attract passengers, and schedule flights across the stars. Each turn you're placing a worker, and if you've cleverly connected your gear tokens to another section on the board, you can perform an additional action there too. I think that single design choice makes every turn really interesting. It makes the puzzle, it sort of just makes it worth solving. It just gives me more options and tougher choices. And as I said before, I sort of love being overwhelmed in games, as long as it's done in the right way. And I think Galactic Cruise he does it pretty damn well. Every action feels meaningful. You upgrade your ships, you grab rewards, you draw cards that grant you temporary powers. It's just these constant serotonin hits. I would say there's probably no such thing as a wasted turn here because you're just constantly being bombarded with rewards. Galactic Cruise does something mechanically that I just really appreciate. It lets you build your own identity. You're not handed a faction card with predetermined powers. You sort of develop who you are over time through the cards that you play and the upgrades that you take. These upgrades, especially the ones that can be temporarily shared between players, make the game feel more interesting. It's the system that keeps things fair, but still pretty exciting because everyone's sort of just finding their own way to feel clever. Although I will say that the cards can be completely busted sometimes, very unbalanced. But I suppose that unbalance sort of keeps things competitive, right? Because they're all available for everyone to draft at any time. You just have to go and take the action. The general loop of building ships, recruiting passengers, and timing your launches, it's satisfying. However, I've played a lot now, and I'm starting to think that the core loop can be a little repetitive, and I think something needs to be done to break it up and make it a bit more interesting. I'm hoping the expansions help with that. Regardless of this being a puzzle that's relatively solitary, I do really enjoy this game. I would give this game a solid A tier. And next is Aeterna. Aeterna is a historical Euro game from Martin Wallace where players manage rival Roman cities, expanding influence, erecting buildings, and trying to maintain control as revolts threaten to tear everything apart. Martin Wallace is sort of the king of designing tightly structured Euros where the creativity doesn't come from unlimited options, but from sort of mastering the limits placed before you. Aeterna is no different. Every turn is very tense because it's all about optimization and damage control. The punishment system here is clever. It doesn't feel random. It all feels like it's under your control to mitigate the disaster, because you can see the downfall coming turns in advance, and it's up to you to decide whether you want to spend precious actions mitigating it or just gamble it and hope that it all pays off later. And as much as this is an economic efficiency game, it's a brutal little player interaction game too. I'll always lean into being a mean player when a game allows it, and this game does. Watching an opponent stretch too thin on revolt control, only to swoop in and take the one building they need to stabilize, it's just it's just so damn fun. And I think it's that sort of quiet and indirect nastiness that I think Wallace does better than anyone else. We of course have a full review of this game on our channel, so if you want to check that out, do so. I go into much more detail, but as it is right now, I would give this game a solid A. And next is Transgalactica. Transgalactica is a sci-fi Euro where you run a space outfit flying around the galaxy using cards to move your ships, complete contracts, and climb a bunch of interlocking tracks in a race for points. I initially would have given this a C, but after we decided to sell it, nobody was buying it. And so a month or so later, we revisited it, and the entire experience just upset me further. I really hate this game. And it's such a shame because the designer is brilliant and I love most of his work. But this damn game just feels so half-baked and pointless. I'm moving up tracks, which is fine because lots of games do this, but here it isn't hidden. It all felt so damn tedious and repetitive. if you have people moving up tracks, you have to jazz it up a little and provide a good variety of bonuses and sort of incentives to keep pushing forward for this game to just, I don't know, for it to feel good. And this game just didn't provide that. Most turns felt fairly uneventful. And worse yet, it's horribly balanced. There are bonus tokens you can obtain randomly, and none of them are balanced. Some are significantly better than others. So you'll complete your task and get some shitty reward, and then someone on their turn will flip their reward and get some, like what feels like a game-breaking power. It just feels completely ridiculous because these aren't bonuses that you compete for, that are open, that you can draft and like other people can like try to get them before you do. It's just random. It's all random. You flip the tile and whatever you get, that's what you get. And like, I'm okay with a little imbalance sometimes when I'm having fun. But in a game that's attempting to be fairly, attempting to be a fairly deep strategy game, it's that sort of mask falls off almost immediately after like a play. And as a writer, I have to mention the fact that the rulebook is a freaking nightmare. It is awful and it is filled with errors. This game is a big old D. It is a D tier game. Next is Cardia. Cardia is a small tactical card game where both players start with identical decks and compete to win signet rings by playing cards in secret and revealing them simultaneously. So the hook here is pretty simple. Each player plays a single card, and then the higher number wins, and they get the ring. And the lower number, they in turn get to activate their power. What makes Cardia fairly satisfying is that the constant psychological battle, sort of similar to Libertalia, where you're not really sure what it is they played, but you're trying to like get in their heads and figure it out. You're always second guessing yourself, like, do you still have that card left? Are they battling me into playing a card they want me to get rid of because they have a better card in the future? That shared deck structure creates a surprisingly like high level of interaction for such a minimal like footprint game. And the fact that each played card can influence both your previous and future cards adds this like cool sense of layering to the design. Even when you lose a round and fail to grab that ring, your card's ability still triggers, and that can be oftentimes exactly what you want. It's clever because it means no play ever feels wasted. You're always getting something out of each card, and often the payoff is part of the bigger plan that your opponent doesn't see coming, or hopefully doesn't see coming. There's a lot of creativity packed into this tiny little box, and this was a really surprising game this year. I would give this one an A. This is a good game. And next is Viva Catrina. Viva Catrina is a light Day of the Dead themed tile laying game where players draft decorative skull tiles from a shared display and build their own colorful tableaus. This is another nice and sort of laid back tile laying game. There is nothing here that is particularly original or innovative. The way you draft your tiles, I suppose, could be, since all tiles for a round are visible to all players and you can choose like sort of what end you want to start drafting from. So the game does encourage you to have a peek at other people's tableaus to see what you can sort of deny them. This is probably the game's only saving grace. This also can create issues if players want to really plan out their entire round by trying to determine who will take what and what tile orientation is best for future draft picks. But that is, of course, on players and not the game itself. It's a nice to have tile laying game that is can be also very random. The biggest issue here is that you can't really do anything with other players. Like Carcassonne is a successful tile laying game that's well loved, not just because you can make it a sort of laid back tile puzzle, but because every move you perform can directly impact your opponents. I could take their road, I could steal their castle, I can muscle them out of their farmers at the end of the game. Here, all I do is draft. I can hate draft basically. But I do think this is a charming little tile placement game, and I'm having a good time with it on Board Game Arena. I give this a B. This is a B tier game. And next is Crafting the Cosmos. Crafting the Cosmos is an abstract engine building game where players move marbles around an orbital action track to take actions, gather stars, and complete contracts across their personal galaxy boards. In a round, you'll move your selected marble around an action track and receive a certain number of actions based on the amount of marbles that have accumulated in both the section you have your marbles in and all the other marbles in the other slots. It's a clever system that's enjoyable to navigate as it provides a fairly engaging puzzle each round. And there is a lot of room for tactical play in this game, where you're doing your best to grab the sort of the best systems and start from maximizing efficiency as you complete contracts. And once you sort of finish a nebula by surrounding it with its desired stars, you can also take an action to move certain pieces on the board to other areas, providing a sort of like neat little sliding puzzle. But my biggest issue with this game is it's a weird one, and one I very rarely talk about. The physical components. I never use the word fiddly, okay? But this game is fiddly. Trying to fit my fat mitts between these two little energy tokens to grab the little life token in between them, it just drives me insane. It drives me insane. The design in this game may look visually pleasing to an observer, but it can get a little awkward to play sometimes and take longer to play because of that. But all in all, it's a clever little game. I would give this a B. This is a B tier game. Next up is Tolleno. Tolleno is a tile laying and area control hybrid where players sail little boats around the board, picking up and dropping off their buildings to fulfill objectives and score points. If you have played any number of tile layers before, you've pretty much already played this game. Its main twist, of course, is the boat movement system. You move in a straight line, grab some of your pieces, and plop them in other buildings to meet scoring objectives. The one thing that stood out to me was how it sort of integrates into area control. Having majority on a tile gives you access to the victory points in the center, which adds just enough competition to keep you sort of like paying attention to what other players are doing. And like a lot of games released this year, this Tolleno it's fine. It's fine. It works. It plays smoothly. It's not something that I'll probably ever go back to. I would give this a C tier. It's a fine game. Then next up is the game of the year. Vantage. Vantage is a card-driven exploration game that promises a cozy, storybook adventure where players journey across illustrated landscapes, roll dice for challenges, and uncover narrative encounters along the way. What a disappointing experience this game turned out to be. Everything it tries to do, it just completely fumbles. It's supposed to be an exploration game, but there's so little here actually worth exploring. The encounters feel like they sort of feel like filler, pretty art with text ranging from mildly interesting to utterly forgettable. The game seems to hoard its good moments, hiding them behind a sort of mountain of dull, meaningless ones. A game can't deliver on the joy of the discovery when the world it's asking you to explore is fairly lifeless. The mechanics are equally uninspired, no, perhaps more so uninspired. You'll roll dice over and over again until the act of rolling feels like a chore and the game's non-existent difficulty kills any sense of tension. You're practically guaranteed to pass every test once you get enough cards, and from that point onward, the game becomes a repetitive slog of moving, reading, succeeding. There's no danger, there's no consequences, there's nothing. And the so-called story, it's just a string of these sort of like disconnected blurbs that feel like random cutouts from an entirely different story. There were so many times in this game where I was sitting there saying to myself like, wait, what the hell am I doing again? And then there's the multiplayer, if you can call it that. The box says it supports 6 players, which that's a joke. The only real interaction is occasionally letting someone put a die on your card with the matching symbol or describing your location's artwork aloud like you're in some like weird improv class. It's the kind of game that might trick you into thinking it's a shared experience, but trust me, play it once, play it solo, and then shelve it. I certainly respect the ambition of this game. There are good points about this game. The art is very pretty. There is a lot of creativity that went into this mass collection of cards. It's an impressive feat, but impressive feats don't make good games. If you want to see a more explanation on why I think this game sucks, watch my, I think, pretty good review of it. I promise it's entertaining. Even if you don't agree with me, I would give this one, it's a D. It's a D tier game. And next is Arydia. Arydia, The Path We Dare Tread, is a massive open-world campaign game where you and your friends explore a bright fantasy world, complete quests, and uncover new areas hidden behind advent calendar-style boxes. I definitely view this as more of a family adventure game than your traditional, like, super geeky Gloomhaven type experience. And if you go into this game expecting that and understanding that, you're going to have a much better time. I think the exploration here is done really well, perhaps some of the best exploration I've seen in one of these styles of game in quite some time. And yeah, it is really fun opening those like advent calendars. This is a very cleverly designed campaign system that I appreciate a lot, even if it's a little overwhelming when you first sort of unbox everything and spray everything out. But the game, the problem with the game is it doesn't start strong. Combat early is painfully dull. You know, you basically just run up to enemies and you whack them with every single action. But it does get better though, as you unlock new skills and your character start to develop a little depth. It's certainly not Gloomhaven by any stretch of the imagination, but it's decently engaging enough that it eventually compensates for those earlier like dull sessions. I do wish the stat system had a bit more substance, and building maps, especially towns, can be pretty tedious. And while the individual quests are fun, I really wish there was more of an overarching story connecting everything together more fluently. It would have elevated the game to something truly special, because it mostly feels like these are sort of large collection of side quests, which could be a good thing, perhaps if you're like myself and you sometimes have to go long periods between plays and you can't remember anything. As it stands though, Arydia is still, it's a very good game, and I would give this either an A or B. I'm gonna go high B, but that can change as I go further in the campaign, and maybe it'll move up to an A. But for now, high B. And next is Twinkle Twinkle. Twinkle Twinkle is a tile laying and drafting game where you're building constellations in space, arranging tiles for adjacency bonuses, and avoiding black holes that can mess your system up. So every time I play this on BGA or when I played it on Gen Con, I kept thinking to myself, like, is that it? Like, I kept waiting for some clever twist on tile placement formula, to come into fruition, but it just feels like I've played this game hundreds of times before. Yeah, it's got the typical like adjacency bonus and set collection and that, the one tile that you don't want to place near others. There's just not a lot here that's very creative. It does have that turn order track thing, which is mildly interesting, but after King Domino, I don't even know if it's really that unique anymore. And with no way to interact with my opponent aside from glancing at their board and maybe taking something that they maybe might have wanted, the whole experience just left me feeling like just bored. You see how the black hole works and you think to yourself, oh, if I just get crafty, I can force my opponent to take one, next draft. But no, there's always one more tile than you can take. So even that small opportunity for interaction, it's just not there. I might be a little harsh here. I understand not all play games are for me. They're usually a little basic, but there are lots of all play games that I really enjoy. I really love Ruins. Spoiler alert, that's coming later. But yeah, this one I just feel is not good. I'm going to give this one a D. This is a D tier game. And next is Railroad Tiles. Railroad Tiles is a light tile laying and drafting game where you build up your personal network of tracks, score based on patterns, routes, and around objectives. I feel like this was the game Cities was trying to be last year, a really light tile building game. But unlike Cities, there's actually some weight here. Like Railroad Tiles, I think it's punching above its weight class. When you're drafting those tiles, there's a lot of things to consider with an abundance of options that can leave you sort of like scratching your head while you're trying to come up with the best plan for where to put those tiles. That said, there are definitely moments where you feel like luck just isn't on your side. If you end up later in the draft order, the only good tiles that let you score for the round might be gone before you even get a chance. You could argue that's on you since turn order is pretty much just player controlled, but because you have no idea what's coming next out of the bag, it does kind of just still feel like gambling. Still, the drafting aspect is enjoyable and the building portion of the game is a lot of fun for something this light and short. And for your first play, definitely use the objectives. They add a good amount of depth without making the game any harder to learn. Forget what the rulebook says, use the objectives. But keep in mind, this is also a solitary experience for the most part. Yeah, you can draft your tiles and deny people their pick of tiles, but you're just kind of doing your own thing. Now, apparently there are a ton of expansions for this game that I have never played. Let me know in the comment section if what the best ones are. Because as it stands right now, though, I would give this a B tier. Even without expansions, it's a decent game. It's good. And next is Nature. Nature is a reboot of the classic evolution system, a game about creating and adapting species to survive in a shared ecosystem. Obtain the most food, be it from the watering hole or your friends' dead bodies, and you win. We did it, boys. We found a way to introduce a subscription type model where you play feeling like you're playing a stripped down product for the purpose of selling you more product. And we put all of that into a board game form. We as board gamers now have our very own video game subscription expansion model of our own, complete with marketing buzzwords like streamlined and accessible, all used to obfuscate the fact that many of these modules were likely designed with the base game concurrently and then removed to be sold as separate entities. But don't worry, that's for your benefit. That's for your benefit, you see, because it makes the game more accessible to non-gamers. And if that bothers you, well, the game just isn't made for you, because obviously having variants already in the base game would confuse non-gamers because they're dumb. But of course, having dozens of boxes on a store shelf, all having the exact same name with different subtitles, won't confuse anybody at all. Okay. I'm not the biggest fan of this new way of doing things. I think it puts consumers in a weird spot. And although I did receive the big box version of this, with all the modules, thank you, publisher, I have to approach these reviews as a consumer and not as like a marketeer. So I'm going to split this tier listing into two parts. First, we'll do just the base game, and then we'll do the base game with all the modules in the big box. So we'll start with the base game. On any given turn, you don't feel like you're doing much of anything. The choices are all painfully obvious, and some of the cards are just objectionably better than others. The tension and the creativity that defined the earlier evolution game is just completely absent. The meanness is toned down to the point of just like near extinction. Not being able to establish food in the watering hole at the start of a round, I think absolutely kills one of the big elements of player interactions in the original game. And I really miss the uncertainty around carnivores. In Evolution, that face down card that might suddenly turn into a predator it kept everyone on edge, you know? It was sort of thrilling. Here, everything's open information. If I see you become a carnivore before my turn, I'll just grab one of the many defensive traits and nullify that threat entirely. It turns what used to be a clever bluffing and adaptation system into a fairly predictable turn order puzzle. Without the modules, nature is dull, it's neutered, and depressingly safe. It feels like the equivalent of those old demo CDs you used to get in like video game magazines. Yeah, the base game of nature is a D for me, a big old D. Okay, so with the base game out of the way, let's do the sort of big box, so with a bunch of modules. Now, of course, here is where the game gets actually good. All those elements you miss from climate and the regular evolution system, you see sort of popping up within one of the selected modules. The hidden predators, for example, and that suspense, it comes back through the Jurassic module. Outplays make an appearance through the Rainforest module, that lets you keep your upgrades secret until they're required, and there's lots of traits you recognize from the original game are essentially spread through the various modules that you have to buy as a consumer for your own good because you're an idiot and you couldn't understand if they were all just sort of packaged in the same base game. Sorry, I won't get started again. Listen, it does become a much better game with the modules, and you can add almost all of them together if you really want, unless they're the landscape modules like the Arctic and the Rainforest one. It's still a good game. I think I'll just go back to playing Evolution Climate over this one, but I know this one will get better through additional modules that I believe you can sign up for in a 10-year package deal at a reduced subscription rate of the low price of $9.99 a year. I'm joking. It's a B tier game. Yeah. It's good. It's a good game with the modules. Next up is Fliptoons. Fliptoons is a light card drafting and tableau building game where your cards flip between rounds, shifting your income and abilities as you race to build the best collection of quirky characters. Your tableau of cards changing between rounds to provide you more or less money to purchase new cards. It's creative, and I enjoy the mechanic, despite how random it can be and how it, in many ways, sort of strips away any agency I have as a player. You don't get to decide where every card's benefit comes into play. So sometimes you'll get a draft choices that just sort of end up in terrible positions. And I've definitely had rounds where it felt like everything was working against me, even when I made what I felt like solid picks. It's a very simple game since your actions each round are basically just like buy a card or dismiss a card. There's also a bit of like push your luck baked into a few cards, which is both mildly exciting and mildly irritating when those flips decide for themselves that you're just going to lose this round. I would like to see more cards that create actual meaningful interaction between players. Something's like beyond the camel and the dog. I think there's a couple others because otherwise it really doesn't feel like you're playing anything other than solitaire. And I don't love solitary games unless the puzzle is like really good, and then obviously there's not much puzzle here. It is just like a really quick and fast game. And after playing Castle Combo where last year, where every card feels unique and sort of like bursting with creative scoring opportunities, Fliptoons doesn't quite hit that same high for me. But it's still a fun, light little deck builder that I am still enjoying. So I give this a B. It is a fun game to play now and then. Wouldn't be one that I want to play repeatedly, but once in a blue moon, it is fun. Next up is A Wild Venture. A Wild Venture is a colorful card-driven engine builder where you're creating and tearing down your own little village while moving along an adventure track to collect resources and coins. It's a cool little system with a surprising amount of player interaction given the solitary nature of building your own tableau. There are a good number of cards that directly impact your opponent, sometimes positively, sometimes not so much. And the game does a great job of incentivizing you to pay attention to what your opponent is building. The limited uses of each card also creates a nice tension, since once a card's actions are used up, it's sort of just discarded, which can make for some really tough decisions because you might need that card later in a future turn to boost the effectiveness of something else, but you want to get rid of it now because it's going to help you in the now. That push and pull between using cards for immediate benefits versus long-term strategy, it keeps things pretty interesting. However, the adventure board portion of this game did not resonate with me as much as I would have liked. It felt a little disconnected from the card play. You move your little adventure along a path to collect resources, and while the autumn side adds more engaging choices with coin costs on certain routes, it still felt secondary to the more dynamic village building, and it sort of put that portion of the game to shame. At its core, though, this is a satisfying engine builder. You build up your cards, use them for points, rebuild again, creating this sort of the constant sense of momentum and renewal. The scoring is clever, too, with a Knizia-style balance system that rewards diversity rather than like sheer quantity. It's clever. It's a clever, charming card game. I would give Wild Venture, I would give it a B. It's a B tier game. And next is Forest Shuffle Dartmoor. Forest Shuffle Dartmoor is a standalone follow-up to Forest Shuffle that sees players drafting and playing cards to build their own thriving ecosystem, chaining animals and plant synergies for points. This one's weird because honestly it feels like a patch update more than a new release. I've been playing regularly on Board Game Arena, and the two games are so damn similar they might as well be the same thing. Frogs have been tweaked, bats have been buffed. It's the board game equivalent of a what feels like a balance patch. And you're basically just going to see the exact same powers replicated, but with different animals performing those abilities in what feels like, it kind of feels like a new coat of paint to an existing game. Don't get me wrong, I like Forest Shuffle, so obviously Dartmoor, I obviously I like it too. But would I recommend buying this if you already own the original? I would not. I would absolutely not. I generally think Forest Shuffle with the expansions is infinitely better. I mean, so what do I do with this game? Do I give it an A because I think Forest Shuffle is an A? No, I'm going to give it a C. It's a C tier game. I think without the expansions and the fact that it's a bit derivative because this game already kind of exists, yeah, it's a C. Next up is Hutan. Hutan is a nature-themed abstract game where you're building out your forest by drawing and placing flowers and animals to trigger cascading effects and score points. Because there's no real easy way to plan ahead, turns are highly tactical and reactive. You're mostly responding to the sort of like the luck of the draw. And while clever flower placement can help mitigate that randomness a bit, you're still often at the mercy of whatever just happens to show up. That said, there are some generally satisfying moments, like when you draw an animal into your forest and watch it sort of cascade across the board, fertilizing other areas, and a neat little like chain reaction system. It's a simple but rewarding puzzle when it clicks. Interaction here, of course, is like non-existent beyond racing for limited animals or hate drafting flowers your opponent might need, what makes this game best played at 2 players for sure. You can keep an eye on what your opponent's doing and deny them the perfect setup, which it does add a bit more tension. But you know what? In the market already overflowing with pretty abstract nature games, Hutan doesn't really do anything new or particularly memorable. It's a pleasurable, mildly pleasurable and cute experience. I would give this a C tier. It's fine. And next up is Tag Team. Tag Team is a fast-paced 2-player battle game where you're building your own lineup of fighters and trying to outthink your opponents in a series of clever, simultaneous card play. But what makes Tag Team fascinating is how much depth it packs into such a short little playtime. Every turn you're trying to predict where your opponent will play their card, hoping to disrupt their sort of like their combo chain and let your attack sort of slip through unblocked. It becomes this great little psychological battle that feels surprisingly tense for how simple the system feels. And the asymmetry between characters it's pretty wild. Like each one feels drastically different with some transforming into like entirely new forms mid-game. Others are like splitting into multiple like smaller characters that have like death trigger powers. It's incredibly creative and makes each matchup feel super unique. Despite the simplicity of its rules, every game feels fresh and full of tactical decisions. It's got that rare mix of accessibility and depth that makes you immediately want to play again. And it's really neat because at its heart, it's just a programming game with a very simple action you get to perform on any given turn. Super accessible and a game that will stay in my collection for a while and function as this like cool game to play with friends who have a very limited amount of time to play a game, or if someone's coming over to my house and someone has arrived early. I will say this is just one of the most impressive short 2-player games I played this year. I would give this a solid A tier. Next is Spooktacular. Spooktacular is a chaotic little monster game where you play as classic movie monsters that have escaped their films to terrorize a movie theater and gobble up as many moviegoers as possible to win the game. The core gameplay here is incredibly simple to grasp. You pick up one of a bunch of wild monsters, each with their own unique abilities, and then move around the map, scaring the crap out of moviegoers and sabotaging the other monsters. What's impressive is just how different each monster feels in practice. Some, charge in head first, others sort of like stalk around invisibly or control the board in like weird, sneaky ways. Despite that easy, accessibility, there's a real personality here that keeps early plays fresh and enjoyable. We had a ton of fun with this when we played this at Gen Con, and the people we played with, they seemed pretty damn giddy, and I think that mood was infectious, and I'm really happy we own this game. It is really good. There was a decent amount of tactics and strategy, and I think that for an almost like beer and pretzel style game, it does have a good amount of weight to the decision-making process. Like, even for a fun game, you feel challenged a lot of the time, and you're always sort of like tactically adapting to this like wildly chaotic board state that changes all the time, trying to make sure you're maximizing your turn perfectly with the limited cards you have in your hand. It's a really enjoyable experience, and I love the fact that everything you need to do in the game is just like all spelled out for you on your player board. It is so easy to introduce new players to this game. You just be like, just follow along with what you do on the board. And the great thing is that these powers all feel like so incredibly different. I had a great time with this game. It's not gonna hit the table as often as like our heavier games, but this one was a lot of fun. I really liked it. I would give this is an A-tier game. And up next is Ichor. Ichor is an abstract tile-laying strategy game where each player controls a god with asymmetric powers, leaving behind a trail of influence as they move. This is definitely one of those games that gets better with repeated plays. Your first few matches will feel a little clunky as you and your opponent can constantly like reference your powers, trying to remember what each god can actually do. But once you internalize those abilities, the experience sort of opens up and it becomes less focused on the mechanics and more just like anticipating what your opponent's moves are going to be. The limited use of powers is sort of what makes the system really interesting. Every god ability is a sort of precious, finite resource, and that forces you into some tough decisions, when to commit, when to hold back, just when to spend it. You're always asking yourself, it's worth it to spend that one power now, knowing it might cost you the match later. It's tense and it's clever, but it also means mistakes feel heavy. And it's sometimes frustrating because you will have loads of moments when you just forget what your opponent's piece can do after you make a move. And that's going to happen quite a bit, like I said, in your early plays. And I will say that the random setup at the start can be a little irritating because you can end up in a position where you could be on the back foot in terms of balance and end up with certain pieces and positions where they're just not as viable as they could be otherwise elsewhere. The board play itself, with that sort of like snake-like trail of pieces you leave behind, it's a neat idea that gives a fairly unique spatial puzzle. You're blocking off movement, boxing yourself in and planning several turns ahead, all sort of like at once. It's a satisfying mental challenge, but it can be a little tedious too, dropping and picking up all the tokens over and over again. But that bookkeeping aside, Ichor is a decent game. It is a decent game that I think I'd give this a B tier. It's a B tier game. And next up is its brother, Iliad. Iliad is a two-player abstract from Reiner Knizia, where you're competing to earn the favor of the gods by collecting different types of divine tiles and balancing your set collection just right. What's clever here is that it's not just about grabbing the biggest number or stacking the same color. You really need to diversify and collect at least one of each god type to stay competitive. And that little twist adds a fun layer of tension to your decisions. Of course, this being a Knizia game, it's going for that trademark, like everything must be balanced or you're going to lose scoring system. But for as solid as the foundation is, the luck of the draw can absolutely wreck this game. Only having 2 tiles in hand to choose from each turn just feels like too restricting. There are so many times Kim and I would have a tile in our hand at the beginning of the game that is just like awful. It just felt bad and annoying because it just wasn't you. It's one of those tiles where you just don't want to play it in the early game, but you don't have a choice because you're only choosing from 2 tiles. And you never want to feel that luck in an abstract game, not in my opinion. There's also not a lot of variety here to keep things fresh. After a couple plays, it start to feel very samey, like you're going through the motions of the same match over and over again. And in a genre where 2-player abstracts are competing with some absolute like heavy hitters, Iliad just doesn't have the same staying power. I would say this game is a C tier. No, I don't like this game. And next up is Age of Galaxy. Age of Galaxy is a compact 4X style Euro that blends light worker placement with multi-use cards and quick tactical play. Every action you take revolves around how you use your 7 faction cards. Each one can be played as an alliance to gain powers, or discard it for resources, or spend it to conquer planets. That tight hand management and limited pool of cards creates an increasingly tense little decision space where every choice feels meaningful because you won't get new cards in this game. So really, like I said, it feels tense, sometimes agonizing to choose between these cards, of which you only have 7. It's really impressive how much game is packed into the small little box. Each faction card not only pushes you towards unique powers and combos, but also different scoring paths and technologies, letting you slowly carve out your identity across plays. I love this modern design trend of letting players sort of like build their asymmetrical powers instead of just like assigning them a card at setup. It's very cool, and I think this game does it very well. Interaction here is pretty solid too. Like each round, when whoever has the most cruisers at the end becomes the galactic leader, or whatever the hell the game calls it, and they get to conquer a planet for free. You're going to constantly be watching what others are doing, trying to anticipate, whether they'll burn their cruisers for actions or hold on to them for the title. Just enough tension to keep things engaging. Sort of reminds me of like a lighter version of Dune, at least for that combat example at the end of the round. That said, some turns can feel a very underwhelming, like where you do a lot of small things with very little payoff. But because the game moves so quickly, those few moments, they never overstay their welcome. Yeah, it's a quick and very clever game. I love the player powers that you get through those cards. Yeah, I give this a B. This is a B tier game. This is a good game. And next is El Paso. El Paso is the latest streamlined spin-off of Great Western Trail, aiming to condense that beloved system into a faster, lighter, travel-friendly package. On paper, it sounds great, right? Like everything from deck building to building construction to train movement, all tucked neatly into like one little portable box. But the biggest question is, why? There are a few things I like about it, like integrating all the mechanics into your deck makes the flow of the game feel much smoother than its bigger brother. But man, it's the process. It sort of like strips everything that made Great Western Trail special, strips it down to nothing. The deck building isn't particularly satisfying. The buildings feel bland, and the train system, which was a huge part of what gave the original its identity, especially after the amazing expansions, it barely exists anymore. The streamlining just removes layer of choices. And when I lose agency in a game, you better be giving me something in return. And El Paso doesn't give me anything in return. And hell, while the game is shorter than its predecessor, it's short. It's not short enough to warrant everything it stole from me, if that makes sense. And let's talk components, because I almost never talk components in this channel. But holy hell, like the cloth mat feels cheap as shit, and the whole production looks like it plays like a gimmicky travel edition rather than a proper board game release. I don't know who made that decision, but I'd like to ask them why. Why? Why the game just it feels a little cheap. It's always hard to rate games that follow in the footsteps of great ones because the best parts of El Paso are all just borrowed straight from a Great Western Trail, and everything new feels worse. It's playable, sure, but it's hollow. It made me want to put it away halfway through and just play the original. I don't think this is good enough to warrant keeping the collection. I would give this a D tier. Next up is The Hobbit, There and Back Again. The Hobbit There and Back Again is a roll and write that sees players progressing through Bilbo's journey as they roll dice and draw on their charming little maps to complete various quests. This game reminds me quite a bit of Karuba, which is a cute little tile laying game. In that game, like this one, you're attempting to create like travel paths across specific objectives, except in this one, the objectives change and are a bit more interesting. But at some point, you see through the veneer of Tolkien's world as the theme of this game, and I do feel like they're trying to create some semblance of theme, just sort of like vanishes. And you flip to a new page in the adventure book, kind of like, I don't know, you kind of start to feel like everything you're doing is just like this really dull efficiency puzzle, and everything just starts feeling the same. At least it did for me. I think Kim loved this game, so we're probably going to keep and play through the whole damn thing, but I don't like it. Especially some of the missions where you feel like you've had all agency sort of like stripped from you, and you're left doing almost an identical path to your rivals because the choice is just so damn obvious. Especially with the second mission. The game requires specific routes in some cases, leaving me feeling like this little game is railroading me, and like that's just not a fun experience. There's just something about the core gameplay loop that just doesn't hook me. Drawing a single lines on a dry erase board just doesn't feel as satisfying as laying a tile down in a chosen path like in Karuba. And so because of that, I would give this a C tier. Like I said, I'm gonna have to keep it in my collection anyway and keep playing it. Maybe it'll get better, but yeah, for now it is a C tier game. And next up is Echoes of Time. Echoes of Time is a card-driven tableau builder where actions unfold on a rotating time track, activating only after several turns of delay. I'm really digging this delayed action system. It's kind of cool to plan several turns ahead while juggling whether to spend one of your two precious actions to move cards forward or just let the round naturally do the work for you. And I love that the color of the tile currently off your board dictates which cards in your fellowship can activate for free. This creates this these little moments where you might push a card off early just to use its ability right away. It's a clever decision space, and it constantly keeps you thinking. And there's also a lot of synergy here with an impressive variety of cards that actually feel distinct and like sort of interconnected. It's not just like a, gain a coin, draw a card. These powers combine in unique ways, leading to satisfying like chain reactions that you've essentially that you have set up on your tableau if you set them up properly. And the interaction is pretty decent and occasionally nasty. Some cards let you steal points or resources while others allow you to seize control of shared locations at just the right time, which adds a great amount of tension to the timing puzzle. It plays best at 2, where the back and forth feels a bit more interesting, although there are some cards that you can tell definitely benefit from having more players at the table. My one complaint, though, is that the game runs a bit longer than it should, especially towards the end once everyone's engines are sort of going off and they're doing like a ton of shit all at once. Still, I would give this a B tier. Let's go high B. I give this a high B tier. And next is Sanctuary. Sanctuary is a tile placement game where players attempt to build a zoo, all while lamenting the fact that they're not playing Ark Nova. We played this at Gen Con a couple of times, and it's like, it's okay. It's certainly not Ark Nova, and it's not a lighter version or anything like that, okay? Get Ark Nova out of your mind. It's its own thing, okay? Despite having the Ark Nova brand, which as a consumer, it's a little confusing. I remember when we went there to play, the guy was like very insistent on saying like, this isn't Ark Nova, and I'm left to saying to myself like, well, why is Ark Nova branding all over the goddamn box? Like, if it's not, like, why did you do that if all you're gonna tell me is that it's not Ark Nova? Yeah, anyway. But that issue aside, the focus here is very much on that tile play. This is a very unforgiving tile placement game that I feel you can get completely destroyed by Lady Luck without any control at all. This is not Ark Nova. In Ark Nova, it feels like sometimes you can pivot. Here, I don't feel you can pivot because some of these tiles, like the sex tiles, I mean the sex tiles of the sex of the animal on the tile, not that the tiles are how, never mind, it is a different game. You get a bonus. If you pale the male and female tiles up, you get a bonus. But there's only like one of each in the whole box. So you might get that male rhino and then be waiting the entire game to get the female rhino, and it just doesn't pop up. It's annoying. It's really annoying. And it's a shame because that randomness is one of the biggest complaints people have against Ark Nova, and here it's amplified. I assure you, it's amplified, and it's much worse. Obviously, the game maintains that same action selection mechanic we all love that includes the ability to upgrade those action cards from Ark Nova. It's a system that works and always feels rewarding and fun, but it's just not enough to carry the rest of the game. Placing those animal tiles just doesn't feel as rewarding or strategically interesting as the cards in Ark Nova. There are a lot of restrictions here, like not being able to rotate your zoo tiles, that just feels too restricting to the point where it's just not enjoyable. It also doesn't help that we played against Stella from Meeple University and she absolutely obliterated us. But I harbor no grudges, nor do I let loss impact my rating. But D tier. No, it's not a D tier. I would give this, it's a C tier. It's a C tier game. It's fine. And next up is Zenith. Zenith is a tug-of-war style game where players play cards and attempt to pull colorful planet thingies to their side of the board and win the game. This is a quality tug-of-war game with a ton of different powers provided on those cards, and many of them actually feel fairly interesting and creative, which I find really rare in these tug-of-war style games. I know that's not the right name for the mechanic, but it doesn't escape me, so I'm just gonna keep calling it a tug-of-war game. But hit me up in the comment section and tell me what the actual name is for that mechanic. What's interesting about this game is that it makes you feel like you're in more control than what you probably are. And any game that provides players a strong sense of agency is a win in my book because your options here are fairly limited and the hand of cards you're pulling from is fairly small, but every move feels impactful and I rarely feel like I'm getting screwed by bad draws. Now, despite this, you do get that irritating push and pull that is obviously common in these types of tug-of-war games, where you play a card to bring something closer to your side, only to have your opponent bring it right back to where it started. It's a mild irritation, but it's something that I would completely understand if somebody said they hated this game. I would get it. I, however, really like this one. Because you also have a couple other things you can do on the sideboards that allow you to discard your card for other bonuses, whether it's like discarding a card for technologies or discarding a card for basically getting the leader token and then a small bonus. These things are there to primarily let you mitigate your current hand since you might not have the exact color you want to play on any given turn, but they have the added bonus of providing you more control over the push and pull of the board. All in all, I think this was a very clever little game that definitely surprised me. I really like it. It might even end up in my top 10. I would give this is an A tier game. This is an A tier. And next is Wolf Street. Wolf Street is a fast-paced negotiation game where players take on the role of either traders or brokers, frantically buying, selling, and shouting across the table to make the most money before the market crashes. Now, of course, my main comparison here is Stockpile. And honestly, I think Stockpile does almost everything this game does, but better. That game gives you just enough information to make calculated risks, where Wolf Street leaves everything entirely up to chance. The dice rolls that determine market fluctuations replace Stockpile's like deck system, and that randomness means you're basically making blind guesses. It's like buying stocks based on whether you think the company names are funny. Now, Kim and I play this with the Norwegians from Board Game Ramblings, great couple, but a lot of times I was just left standing there like an asshole half the time, wondering what in God's name I'm doing and why I'm like bidding on these stocks whose fates is determined by just like chucking a die. But I do admire the energy that Wolf Street seems to bring to the table because other people seem to be digging it and like yelling all this crap. It's noisy, it's frantic, and for a few minutes you do get swept up like in the chaos. But once the novelty fades, you start to see how thin it really is underneath the shouting and the dice chucking. I do like the two-sided structure of the game, traders versus brokers. It's an interesting concept, and it adds a unique layer of asymmetry, but it also means one side is always sitting around waiting while the other side resolves their mini game. And for a game that's supposed to be like, it's supposed to feel wild and interactive, that it felt a little awkward at that time. I would give this game a C tier. It's a C tier game. It's fine. Next is Nova Era. Nova Era is a civilization building game where players draft cards, manage scarce resources, and try to rebuild society while everything around them is collapsing. This is a tough and mean little engine builder that constantly throws disasters at you, forcing you to adapt and scrape by every single time for every single point you're trying to earn. We actually did a full review of this on the channel, so check that out for more details, but I'll summarize here. I enjoyed this as much as Kim absolutely despised this. It's not a brilliant game, but it's fun for what it is. Still, this is one of those titles that will vanish from everyone's memory within like a year or two. Hell, I don't think it hasn't been a full year yet. Nobody talks about this game. The best part about Nova Era is that it constantly barrages you with bad shit happening to everyone at the table. You're collectively suffering through wave after wave of terrible events, and it's kind of hilarious how brutal it gets. Every point you score feels kind of earned. This is not a point salad game. It's a point starvation game where eventually you have to eat someone else at the table for nutrition. I've taken that metaphor too far. That said, the draft can be a little janky. Sometimes the cards that show up are completely useless for your strategy. Or worse, they show up way too late in the draft to draft order to matter. But I do like the drafting tension that mimics Seven Wonders Duel, where you might pass on a decent card just so you don't reveal the card underneath it to your opponent. It's neat. It's a fun, nasty little game that I'm happy to keep in my collection for now, even though Kim doesn't like it, and I don't think anybody I played with it likes it. So maybe it won't stay in the collection for long, but I would give this a B tier. It's a B tier game. Next up is Pergola. Pergola is a light tile laying and set collection game about growing flowers and attracting insects to your garden. I feel this game takes like way too long to teach considering how light it is. The whole experience just feels uncreative and mind-numbingly boring, which is the shame because the aesthetics and how you build your personal garden board, they're genuinely beautiful. Like it's a kind of game that like content creators will gush over and use the word like cozy every 5 seconds. And then eventually they'll eventually kick it to the curb and never mention it again. But listen, the game's aesthetics can't save it from how soulless it feels. 3 of the 4 available actions are basically the same thing. You just do slightly different versions of like collecting bugs. Even the scoring is lazy. Some flowers and butterflies score almost identical, as if the designer just sort of like ran out of ideas halfway through. I don't mind light games, but you've got to give me something. A moment where action A feels different from action B has to be the least amount you can give me. If it wasn't for the cute theme and lovely production, I would happily throw this straight into the F tier, even though we don't even use the F tier anymore. But I can at least imagine it resonating with non-gamers or garden enthusiasts, I guess, who just want something pretty and gentle to play. On the other hand, I hate gardening and I play way too many games for this to work on me, so I'm giving this a D tier. I don't like it. It's lazy, it's crappy, I hate it. This is this year's Harvest. I hate that game too. And next up is the surprise game of the year, Ruins. Ruins is a clever and fast-paced card game that uses translucent overlays to upgrade cards, much like Mystic Vale, but ties that system to a shared deck card shedding mechanic. This is just a fantastic little game that took both Kim and I by a huge surprise at the convention. We bought it almost immediately after playing it, even though the publisher ended up sending us one as well, so now we have 2 copies. It nails that fine line between simplicity and depth. The translucent like overlay system makes upgrading cards feel tactile and rewarding, and it's wild how much strategy this compact design manages to like pack into a small little system. You feel there are so many cool choices on your turn that you can pull off, and you feel clever because of the upgrade system that's present and the limited resources you have to perform those upgrades. The best part is how the game layers its choices. You're constantly torn between improving cards for short-term value or like long-term potential. And since you only have 2 claim tokens, you can't hoard everything you build. Sometimes you'll buff a card to like near perfection only to have it rotate into someone else's hand, which is hilarious and brutal at the same time. It's also one of those rare card games where every action feels meaningful. There's almost like no downtime, and every turn creates this satisfying like little chain of reactions of like, if I do this, then this happens. For such a small and affordable little box, it's astonishing how much like game you get in there. Yeah, I'm gushing. I'm gushing over this like tiny little game. But this, I hopefully emphasizes to you that like I can totally like light games. There just has to be something there. This is an S tier light game for sure. And next up is Suna Valo. Suna Valo is a light little resource management and engine building duel where 2 players compete to optimize production, fulfill deliveries, and race their ships across a limited number of turns. This is a cool little game, like it feels satisfying, sort of like battling your opponent for efficiency, where you and your opponent are each trying to squeeze out every little bit of value from the system and the structure that you've created. But I think the market system is the standout mechanic for me. Having to price your cards while knowing your opponent can buy them from you, and that you'll need to pay that same amount yourself later if you decide to buy them, forces you to constantly watch their board and make these like tough calls. It's a subtle layer of interaction that gives the game its tension without breaking the otherwise like calm, puzzle-like engine building experience. You're racing on multiple fronts at once, competing for cards, finishing deliveries, and advancing your ship. And that ticking clock of roughly 20 turns keeps the pressure on from start to finish. Every action feels meaningful, and the design encourages you to plan several turns ahead while staying sort of like nimble to be able to react to what your opponents are doing. I really like this one. I think it's a smart and surprisingly interactive for what feels like a sort of like what should be a solitaire style game. I give this an A tier. This is an A tier game. I enjoy this one. And next is Gatsby. Gatsby is a light, fast-playing set collection and area control game where players compete for influence across 3 distinct regions of the board, each acting as its own little minigame. Hidden information plays a key role here, as you're constantly watching what your opponents collect and trying to anticipate their next move, while timing your own actions for maximum payoff and sort of like messing with them and making sure you move what they need to a different area since some of the guests are face down. My biggest issue with this game is one of the bonus abilities, specifically the one that allows you to dictate where your opponent has to place their action pawn on their turn. I despise this. Games should always aim to give players as much agency as possible, and this strange little like take that mechanic strips that away completely. It's not a huge punishment since you still get to perform an action, but it's just not fun. It's not fun, and worse, it happens a lot. There's no limit to how many times it can happen, meaning you get hit by it multiple turns in a row. It's no better than the miss a turn mechanic we all remember as kids. It was shitty then, and it's shitty now. That said, I do appreciate how interactive this game is for such a light filler game. You're constantly manipulating your opponent's options, vying for position, engaging in small and meaningful acts of sabotage. The hidden information works well here too, encouraging you to track what others are doing and sort of react accordingly, which it does keep things interesting. It's an adequate game. That's about all I can really say. It's this like collection of mini games that really don't feel very rewarding or engaging, and doesn't really feel as if there's any semblance of unity between them all. It's pretty much just like gunning for those bonuses to get any semblance of enjoyment from this game. I would give this is a C tier game. And next is Nemesis Retaliation. Nemesis Retaliation is the newest standalone entry in the Nemesis series, reimagining the classic survival horror formula into a more combat-oriented experience. It doesn't capture that same hyper-paranoid claustrophobic feeling that the original has. If Nemesis is Alien, then Retaliation is more like Aliens 3. It's faster, louder, and a little less tense. The combat focus is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's satisfying to feel capable, like mowing down intruders with upgraded weapons and feeling like you can handle whatever comes at you. On the other hand, that very strength takes away from some of the series' like trademark dread, where every noise could spell doom and betrayal was just like a bad card away. You could still get messed up here, sure, but the fear has been replaced by sort of like adrenaline. You are running around like crazy in this game, people trying to accomplish all their goals all at once. And because of that, the cooperation here is pretty fun. Deciding when to split up, who takes which mission and who's going to be left behind, because someone is always going to be left behind. It's fun. I seem to be the one that gets killed a lot, and then people all sort of decide that it's not worth taking me to the infirmary, but whatever, I'm not bitter. I appreciate that cinematic experience. Yeah, it's not going to replace Nemesis for me, but I do think it's a really great game. And if like you wanted a game that's a bit more more action packed than the original Nemesis, this would be the one for you. I still give this one an A tier, and in fact, it might even end up in my top 10. I did have a lot of fun with this one. And next is Red Carpet. Red Carpet is a flashy photo party game where players jockey for position around a felt runway, snapping the perfect celebrity photo at just the right angle with their phones. When we were at the convention, we were so drawn to this game because it looks incredible on the table. The runway with the giant cardboard celebrities, the built-in use of your phone, it screams unique. But that novelty, it wears off really fast. Within a few rounds, we were wondering if we can just skip the whole photo taking process. Maybe I'm alone here, but I don't usually have my phone out when I'm gaming with my friends. I give them and the game my full attention. So having the gameplay revolve around snapping pictures felt more like a chore than a clever mechanic. And the card play is where this game completely falls apart. You can end up with a hand that's completely useless, full of turn a celebrity around cards, while everyone else gets to meaningfully shape the runway. It's brutal. There's almost nothing you can do to mitigate that luck, and when a game this light gives you almost no agency, the frustration kicks in and I get really freaking mad. And because the decision space is already so limited when luck kneecaps you, there's just nothing left to hold my interest, It's a gorgeous creative idea that collapses under the weight of its own gimmick. The entire thing just feels half-baked as hell. There was an idea here and it wasn't fully fleshed out, and instead just sort of rushed to the door. I do love the uniqueness of the theme. It's a very cool concept, but I would give this a D tier. I really, really don't like this game. Next is Azul Duel. Azul Duel is a two-player head-to-head version of the classic tile drafting puzzle, introducing new layers of competition and a few clever twists to freshen up the familiar Azul formula. I actually enjoy this one more than the original Azul. It adds just enough new mechanics to make every turn feel a little more cutthroat without overcomplicating things. There's this wonderful mean streak here that I absolutely love. Watching your opponent's board, calculating what they need, and ensuring they get stuck with a pile of useless tiles is deeply satisfying in a way that's probably concerning. It's easily one of the most competitive feeling Azul experiences to date, in my opinion. That said, it is slightly more complex than the original, and that doesn't necessarily work in its favor. If you're new to the series, the base Azul already shines as a two-player game, and so this is best suited for fans who have already played a lot and want something a little different. The new dome tiles are a particularly fun addition, offering another layer of strategy without bloating the rules, but these new additions may not be enough to really not really enough to dethrone the original. I don't really like the growing duel trend across board gaming, but Azul Duel, it does earn its place as a valid spinoff. I would give this a B tier. It's a good game. And next up is Dirt and Dust. Dirt and Dust is a dice-driven racing and deck-building hybrid that can be played solo or multiplayer. You'll be rolling dice, managing traction, and strategically upgrading your vehicle by swapping cards in and out of your engine row to maintain momentum across the track. This is a fun little solitaire puzzle that provides a good variety of options on any given turn that can be fairly brain-burning sometimes when you're factoring in every card ability. You'll be rolling new dice, mitigating existing dice, and clearing spots within your card row, only to strategically replace those cards with new cards that fit better in the current situation, all in the exact same round. And what's cool is that you can do any of these actions at any time. So it can be a little overwhelming at sometimes, but that's what makes it a cool exercise in sort of tactical play. As a multiplayer game though, this game is lacking. Seriously, aside from the popularity die, there was zero interaction here. It sort of makes sense given that it's yet another simultaneous play game. I think this one is best played solo, and then, heading to Board Game Geek to boast about your high score and pretending like everyone else, gives a shit. I think I'd give this game a B tier. I've only played it a few times. I'd be curious to see if that goes up in the future. But for now, B tier. And next is Arkham Horror Lovecraft Letter. Lovecraft Letter is yet another reimplementation of the classic love letter formula, this time wrapping its familiar deduction and bluffing gameplay in a layer of Lovecraftian madness. Now, the Madness ability, it is pretty cool. You know, it essentially leaves every card to have more options because most cards have an alternative like ability that is typically quite a bit more powerful, provided that you have gone insane. And so you're sort of presented the opportunity to make yourself go crazy just to push your luck and play those better cards. In a game with very limited options, it's the added tactical decision, it is nice. I appreciate this game for what it is, and I'm ranking it based on the fact that it's an okay introduction to board gaming, and I do think this one is the better love letter in the franchise. However, the game is just so it's so bloody random that it just drives me insane sometimes as a gamer. A lot of times you're just making blind guesses and you have almost no information to go on. There are so many opportunities for like cool moments of deduction, but the game just doesn't allow for them to occur. At best, you're kind of sort of simply flipping a coin. I'm not against these types of light and silly games. I just think there are an abundance of games that provide a similar experience, and so the do so too is so much better. I'll always play Coup, for example, over Lovecraft Letter. I would give this a C. If you do love Love Letter, I think this is the best one, so you should definitely check it out. But if you don't love Love Letter, this won't convince you. Next up is Cretaceous Rails. Cretaceous Rails is a dinosaur-themed pick up and deliver game where you're laying track, managing resources, and transporting prehistoric cargo across a dino-filled landscape. This is a solid design overall, but it's one of those games that feels a little too familiar, like you've played, kind of like you played this one before, just not with dinosaurs. The tile placement and delivery mechanics, they're smooth, but there's nothing here that really pops out that differentiates it from like the sort of endless stream of rail-themed Euros out there. The one standout element is how efficiently it uses a central map, forcing players to really think about the route efficiency and timing as they compete for sort of limited objectives. The game really does come down to the individual powers you'll be accumulating throughout the game. You really need to get some of those powers quickly, or you'll be left behind by someone that has gained the perfect combination of abilities. Because competition and interaction here it's all pretty tight. While you can't mess with your opponents, you can see exactly what they need and sort of scoop up those dinosaurs very quickly and therefore completely ruin whatever they were planning. For one, I enjoy these types of interactions, but I know it can rub some people the wrong way because it can be very difficult to pivot and change tactics in this game once you've been fundamentally screwed with, I guess. It is a good game. I don't think it's doing anything remarkably special. Kimberly likes it, so we're not getting rid of it. So I'd give this a B. Next is Star Wars Battle of Hoth. Star Wars Battle of Hoth is a tactical skirmish game set in a lesser-known corner of the Star Wars universe, where small squads of Rebel and Imperial forces clash over control of a frozen outpost. So the Command and Colors system is just a great and fantastic way to introduce people to wargaming. This one shrinks the board a little, but it gets you to the battle faster and adds a lot more asymmetry. So you're left feeling like you're playing a very different side from your opponent, which is a lot of fun. And the command deck is no longer shared. Instead, you have individual faction decks that fit the theme of your army and provide you different options from your opponent. Now, we played this at Gen Con and we had a really good time with it. And thankfully, I had the opportunity to play a few more times with a friend's coffee. Seeing all the different scenarios was pretty cool because it looked like it had a lot more variety than what you get from something like Memoir or Command and Colors. Command and Colors Ancients. The focus here is more just like and those ones is more like kill X amount of units. Here it's like rescue this person or escort this person or destroy this important piece of equipment. It makes the experience more fun and more feeling like a war game, which is, even though it's a light game, it should feel like that. Overall, it's a great rendition of the system, but honestly, Command and Colors Ancients is still the one I'd recommend. It's the best. There's no topping that one. But I think that it acts as a good replacement for Memoir 44, and if you're into Star Wars, this is pretty much a no-brainer. I would give this an A. This is a really good game. Next is Lord of the Rings: The Fate of the Fellowship. Lord of the Rings: The Fate of the Fellowship is a cooperative story-driven board game where you and your friends replay and reshape the journey of the Fellowship across key moments in the trilogy. I'm not a big fan of Pandemic anymore. Like, I find the formula fairly boring. This game, though, despite having a lot of similarities, and building on that same foundation, it doesn't feel entirely like Pandemic to me. That there's so much here that I find pretty damn fun. I love that you control two characters, and those characters can have multiple special abilities. I love the added battle element and the feeling of like mustering my troops to the through essentially the power of friendship, literally, and then trying to take on the forces of Sauron. I like the impact and strategic decision making of multi-use card play and deciding if I should venture a character into a specific region just so I can turn the card into sort of a banked resource. The event cards are great and feel really powerful despite mostly just being specific like circumstances. The scenarios are also really nice and varied and feel mechanically different while also catering to the sort of like the thematic game lovers and being, sort of true to the literary source. There are certain issues I have with the game, like you're going to have turns where you're sometimes skipping actions because you don't have a ton to do with the resources you have and you don't need to move anywhere. It can make good strategic sense in the moment, but it feels kind of strange doing it. But these are nitpicks, I think. I think all in all, I would give this an A. I think it's a really good use of the pandemic formula, and I'm hoping at some point he moves on. He moves on and we get no more pandemics. But it's a good game. And next is Cores of Discovery. Cores of Discovery is a cooperative exploration and survival game inspired by the Lewis and Clark expedition, where players chart unknown territory, manage dwindling resources, and try not to die in increasingly miserable ways. This is a game that it almost never seems to get talked about, and I'm not entirely sure why. It is such a clever little cooperative game that fills a fairly unique spot in my collection, since it's both a cooperative resource management game like Robinson, but it's also like a fairly smart deduction game where you're doing your best to determine where the good stuff is on the map, and then doing your best to sort of grab it and conserve it for when it's necessary. You do need a few games under your belt to really have an idea what's going on. Deduction here it's not super complicated. It's just that a lot of the things like, okay, water is always near wood, right? And then, and teepees. And our teepees are always within the range of food, but adjacent to monsters. So what I'm looking for, it must be located here. That's the general thought process. It's not necessarily complex, but it is enjoyable. But I will say that the game can be fairly difficult and you're going to lose a lot in the early stages and feel like you're just wandering around doing nothing. But eventually it clicks and you start having fun. I've mostly been messing with this solo because it works really well as a solitary game. Although I do think it's enjoyable to put, two heads together and sort of talk it out, using the deductive elements and go through the variety of struggles in the game together, essentially. But you'll be happy either way you play it. I think this is a really unique game. I'm happy to see, games kind of like trying new things. And I think this one is definitely something that tries something new. And I give it a B. This is a B tier game. It's good. And next up is The Fellowship of the Ring, a trick-taking game. The Fellowship of the Ring, a trick-taking game, is a cooperative card game in the same spirit as The Crew, where each chapter gives players different characters from the Fellowship, each with their own victory conditions, doing their best to work together and take tricks or some shit just like the books. At first, the game feels fresh and sort of charming. The art is gorgeous, with its like stained glass sort of motif, and it has really beautifully drawn characters. And the early missions, they feel engaging. But as you keep playing, the repetition, for me, starts to sort of set in. Many chapters feel too prescriptive, like you're not figuring out how to make your hand work, you're simply matching the right character to the cards you've been dealt. And once you've solved the scenario, it doesn't really hold much replay value. And the later missions demand near perfect hands, at least in my experience, to win, which feels a bit more punishing than it is satisfying. The main issue is that Fellowship lacks the clever problem solving that makes The Crew shine, I think. In The Crew, the ability to communicate indirectly and make small, meaningful inferences creates incredible tension and cooperation. Here, there is no communication system, so much of your success sort of depends on luck rather than good play. There are interesting goals and a few great scenarios, but too often the game feels like it's playing you instead of the other way around. But it's not a bad game. It is a fine game. I'm also not the biggest fan of trick takers, so they have to be really, really good for me to like them. But I would say, even just as a general trick taker, I would say this is like a C tier, maybe a high C. I'll just say C tier. And next is Leaders. Leaders is a fast-paced, abstract strategy game about positioning, movement, and clever use of asymmetrical powers to surround the opponent's leader and win the game. Each turn, you'll either move one space in any direction or trigger a special power on each unit. The variety of champions is where most of the fun is. You can sort of like pull enemies, others can attack from a range, and some create opportunities that only reveal themselves after a few plays. Despite the tactical depth, games move quickly, and they sort of like rarely last more than, I would say, maybe 20 minutes. There's even a little theme here too, despite the gameplay, being fairly abstract. Abilities tend to match their names nicely, like the assassin kills instantly when adjacent to the leader, and the Minotaur dude, he sort of like charges straight towards theirs, and the archer can strike from like 2 spaces away, but not up close. None of it's necessarily immersive, but the logic behind those abilities adds a nice touch of flavor that keeps the game from feeling too sterile, which a lot of abstracts, in my opinion, can suffer from. The drafting process adds a fun layer of variety since you'll always be working with a new mix of powers. There's a bit of luck in the combinations you end up with, but skillful play, matters more. And even strong combos can fall apart if you use them improperly. Plus, once you start playing the advanced game, you can do like this really cool like MOBA style draft where you can like deny some characters if you know they synergize with the characters that your opponent has already drafted, which I really like. I really like that. Yeah, this isn't like a crazy deep game, but I would say this is a solid 2-player abstract game. I think one of the better ones this year. I give this an A. It's an A-tier game. And next is Critter Kitchen. Critter Kitchen is a charming worker placement and set collection game where you're adorable animal chefs competing to prepare the best dishes for various food critics. I'll never understand the hate for hidden objectives. I love them. I love them. They make me pay extra attention to what my opponents are doing, which adds a sort of subtle but meaningful layer of interaction. Like here, you're constantly trying to deduce what the secret critic's goal might be based on what ingredients others are grabbing. It's tricky since players pick up like a ton of stuff, but as you play more and start recognizing the patterns, it becomes a really satisfying light deduction puzzle. Very light in its deduction, but still, it's there. And then every third round, you'll serve up your best ingredients for 3 separate dishes. But deciding whether to use your best ingredients now or save them for the big final course, it's a fun, it's a tense decision space. But ultimately, the primary thrust of this game is enjoying the experience of predicting your opponents correctly, like sending your workers to spots the others ignore and scooping up all 3 ingredients with your big worker. It feels really good. You know what I mean? And getting your small worker out there who has first pick into a spot where there's like a lot of good ingredients and scooping it before they do, that also feels really damn satisfying. But when that ship happens to you, it's brutal. So if you don't like those like highs and lows that this game provides, then you're not gonna like this game. Yeah, I was surprised at how much I like this one. It was one that I knew Kim would like, and so we grabbed it. It's simple, it's clever, it's full of great little moments where you feel triumphant. It has the same artist as Flamecraft, which is a really boring game, but is really cute. I would give this an A. This is an A-tier game, and I can guarantee it'll be on Kim's top 10. And next is Recall. Recall is a heavy sci-fi Euro game about rebuilding civilization through efficient action sequencing and smart engine building, and there is some sort of theme here, but who cares? Just get points, my dude. Every decision in this game feels impactful, like you're constantly racing against a ticking round clock, trying to make every key upgrade and every action line up perfectly. It demands your full attention. It's not a game where you pull out when you're tired or you're feeling like catching up with your friends. No telling me about the traffic you experienced going to work. We came here to solve a puzzle. Don't show me pictures of your kids. We're here to play, damn it. We're here to play Recall. I have no problem with kids. What really makes Recall cool is how much freedom it gives you to shape your faction. Every part of your board can be upgraded or customized. The alien bonuses, the action improvements, like even the keys that double as both resource and sort of mini engines. I love when a game lets me build my own identity instead of just having me like, I get a preset player powers. I know I've said that a few times. Here you truly feel like you're carving your own path, and every session feels fresh because of that. You just get a really satisfying and overwhelming feeling as you play. Every decision matters and every action feels fulfilling, even though the whole experience is incredibly tight. Now, people have compared Recall to Revive, and I get it. They share the same DNA and the whole post-apocalyptic exploration, like engine building thingy jig. But this one just, I think, clicks with me more. The exploration here feels more rewarding, and I love that all the round objectives are public, letting you sort of adapt your focus as you go. Plus, the aliens you encounter as you research them and as you go up tracks adds this like wicked sense of discovery, and it's actually pretty exciting. Yeah, this is absolutely my type of game. Do I give this an S tier? Oh, it's close, man. It's close. I don't need to play it more. I'm going to give it an A tier for now, but this is one I definitely could see, like, if you asked me a year from now, I might give it an S, but it's an A tier for now. And next is Bohemians. Bohemians is a deck building game where players take on the roles of struggling artists in a turn-of-century Paris, doing your best to match a slew of symbols and not spiral into depression because you forgot your shift as a waiter. This game encourages a bit of role playing here and there. And I always kind of like when games do that. You're meant to fully sort of embrace the inner narcissistic artist and sort of ramble to the table about your boring ass day, pretending everyone else gives a shit. We tried this for a few rounds before quickly abandoning that though, because they do say to do that in the rule book. It turns out nobody actually cares that Pablo, the unemployed painter, spent like three hours staring out the window to look for inspiration. But to the game itself, I'm a little worried about its staying power. After a few plays, it's already starting to feel like I'm just sort of matching symbols over and over and over again, and nothing really matters. Like you use muses to sort of power up the column that you place it in, and then you race to grab victory points. And like in many deck builders, it never feels great using your buying power just to pick up a VP card when you could be like building a cooler, more fun deck instead. It's technically the path to victory, but it feels like a tax on the fun part of the game, which is unfortunate. The game occasionally offers interesting decisions. You can, for example, you can skip work for the day to match your symbols, but you'll take a negative trait into your deck for doing so. So, you know, you skip work to write a poem. Well, congratulations, now you have syphilis. That's the kind of tragic artist energy this game is like sort of like channeling. Unfortunately, though, the game just kind of feels scripted. The choices don't feel that challenging. Most turns, you know exactly what card fits best in your deck. And more often than not, it's the most expensive one. And there's just times you're going to be screwed by a bad hand in this game. And there's just gonna feel like there's just no way to avoid it. There's nothing you can do to mitigate it. Which is really rough because there are times when your opponent will just start snowballing, and they will snowball early. So right now, I'd give Bohemians like a C. It's a C tier game. It's fine. It's a fine game. Next is Ants. Ants is a medium-heavy Euro game where players build and expand their colonies through card-driven engine building, tile exploration, and worker placement. The game definitely felt sometimes like a hodgepodge of different mechanics, but I think it did a relatively good job of making them mostly sort of blend together, as the cards seem to be what tie everything together to make the interplay feel like seamless and interesting. The card play, by and large, is what carries this game. There are a lot of unique abilities and scoring opportunities in this sort of like massive deck, and most feel like really rewarding to play. But on that card play, there is an issue of snowballing in Ants, when if someone gets the right combination of cards, a player could find themselves going way beyond everyone else, because they have more ants at their disposal for future turns, providing them to get more lucky cards in the future. Yeah, it's all sort of on a public market, but if good cards are there on other people's turns and mediocre cards are there on your turn, you're gonna have a rough time. But that asymmetry, is for better or for worse, is really part of the game's charm. There are a lot of opportunities here to differentiate yourself from other players at the table, with the cards being like so incredibly varied. You can feel different every game and feel clever when you find these sort of like new combinations you haven't seen before. And the interaction here, it's pretty good for your typical Euro. And no, it's just good for a board game in general. Most interactions are sort of mutually beneficial. So you might explore a tile, and because the opponent has forgers sort of surrounding that tile, they also reap the benefits, which is a nice touch because it makes you rethink what the thing that might be optimal for you, if you know it benefits others. Or at least this is my train of thinking, but I understand that not everyone's a prick like myself. I think I'd give this an A. I think it's a very clever game. I'm really digging it right now, and I'm looking forward to playing it more. I don't think Kim likes it as much as I do, but that's fine. Sometimes I can just force her to play things. I think it's because she doesn't like ants, like generally. And next is Emberheart. Emberheart is a mid-weight, family-friendly worker placement game where players send out their workers to gather resources, recruit heroes, and capture dragons to forge powerful alliances. So at this game's core is a cool bidding style placement like twist thing, because when you place your crest on an action space, you can stack a variable number of workers beneath it to determine priority and strength, which kind of creates a really clever layer of tension interaction. Because if I put 5 out there, I know that I'm going to go first and get to pick what I want, but I might not want to spend all 5 on one spot. I really think that system really is the hook here, since it forces you to constantly watch what other players are doing and weigh, you know, how many grunts you can afford to commit. It's a great little decision space, because if you commit too many, you'll lose flexibility for later. Too few, and you might get blocked entirely and not get exactly what you want. And the discard mechanic for workers adds even more depth, since at the end of the round, you have to get rid of all the workers unless you've been upgraded to specialized workers, which is another sort of neat decision space to be in for something that's a fairly light game. So a solid amount of variability between games, thanks to the hero and dragon pairings you can get. They grant asymmetric powers. These combinations create a nice rhythm of tactical decision making and sort of pivoting, keeping each session feeling fresh, even if the core actions remain entirely familiar. Now, while I personally found it enjoyable as a lighter strategic experience, Kim didn't care for this game at all. And I get why. After a few rounds, it starts to show that sort of worker placement grind, like feeling when you're mostly just putting things down to get more things. It's a solid design, and it's great for newer gamers and easy to teach, but for heavier players like us, it starts to lose its spark after a couple of plays. I'd keep it around for a teaching game, though, because it's approachable, and it's fairly interactive, but it doesn't have enough ideas for me to be like completely entertained and interested for the long run. I would give this a B tier. Don't ask Kim what she'd give it, because she'd probably say F, but I would give it a B tier. It is a good game. It's nice seeing Mindclash sort of branch out from the heavier stuff they usually do, but just don't forget your roots, Mindclash. You are supposed to be making games specifically for me that are incredibly overwhelming and overwrought and convoluted, and I love them. And next is Hoth. Hoth is a pure area control brawl where players draft action dice, deploy specialized troops, and maneuver their factions across a cramped map, fighting for dominance. This is very much a pure area control game, both through its benefit and its detriment. I think we've all become very used to modern game design mixing like 10 mechanisms together, that when a game fully commits to one, it almost feels strange at first. But Hoth makes good use of that simplicity. Everything feels tight and very cutthroat, with just enough variety put into the factions to keep things interesting and prevent the game from feeling samey between plays. Those different factions, they really do change how you play. Like, each one has its own abilities you select before the match begins, and the specialized troops do feel genuinely distinct. But I am the type of gamer who often bounces off like pure area control games, but I did enjoy this one. What's the thing people say all the time? The knife fight in the phone booth. It is kind of like that. And you will occasionally feel a little too restricted, especially when it comes to movement and deployment. There's this option where you can ditch 2 dice to make a massive movement play across the map. And while it is really powerful, it also feels awful to lose 2 dice. Also, it's really irritating to watch. It's like somebody starts like just moving shit all over the place. But if you don't enjoy area control games, I'm not sure there will be much here to convert you. I know I likely won't play it again, so I'm trying to be objective here and say that as a pure area control game, it gives a pretty good job. Or sorry, it does a pretty good job. I would give this a B. This is a good area control game. I won't play it again, but it is a good one. And next is Forestry. Forestry is a tight, efficient-driven Euro where you'll navigate a shared action map, manage limited action points, and slowly build an engine that has you becoming a tree-chopping and planting juggernaut as you make weird shit out of wood like bicycle helmets. This is a game where you are constantly stressing that you're not making the optimal move, and honestly, that's sort of the best part of the game. That super tight 9-round structure does a great job of pushing you into tough efficiency decisions. And when that game ends, you immediately start replaying your decisions in your head, wondering like what tiny improvements you could have squeezed out to get a better score. It's a fun and stressful feeling, and it's what I really like about Forestry. But I also really enjoyed that shared movement board where you're sort of navigating your engineer or digger to different action spaces. The only downside is that both types of movement feel like a wasted action at the time because you don't get much out of moving. You're mostly just setting up your next turn. The interaction here, though, is like it's pretty light, but it works. Like, you lose the engineer bonus if someone already is on that space where you move your guy to, and you can use your opponent's structures with the digger. It's mostly positive interaction. Despite being a mean player, I actually think the system fits the vibe of the game pretty well. Like you're out here doing hippie shit, right? So it's you can't mess with people. It's unfortunate. Although I will say that classic blocking interaction you get in worker placement games is felt way more here because of that desire to be super efficient. So the road blocking, it's hard here. But I enjoyed this one. It's a combo heavy game that starts slow and becomes an absolute like engine building monster as your actions sort of begin triggering other actions, and your whole forest economy starts going like crazy, triggering more actions. Like, the game certainly, it isn't doing anything wildly innovative mechanically, but what it's doing, it's doing very well. I would give this, Kim doesn't like this. game that much, so we probably won't play that much, but I do enjoy it, so I hope I can take it out with friends more. I'd give it an A. It's an A tier game. And next is Luthier, or I think people are saying Luthier. Luthier. Luthier is a hidden information worker placement game where players send their family out to craft instruments, recruit patrons, repair instruments, and help facilitate symphonies, all to become the most prestigious luthier around. The thing that hits you right away and absolutely overwhelms you at first is just how many different ways the game like shoves rewards and player customization in your face, like worker powers, patron powers, instrument tracks, mastery tracks. Almost everything you do gives you something that allows you to differentiate yourself from other players. It's an avalanche of options, and it's so daunting that designers literally give you like they give you an opening move quick reference, like basically telling you, like it's like chess or something, like do these 3 opening moves for better strategy. We had a good laugh when we first saw it, but after the first play, we kind of got why it was there, because everything was very overwhelming at first. But once you understand how everything works, you'll start seeing how well everything works together. Planning becomes far smoother, even though you're sort of constantly adapting to new card reveals and calculating based on what your opponents seem to be eyeing. I adore hidden information games where paying attention to other players actually matters. And this game nails that. You're not only guessing worker strength placement, since whoever has the highest number goes first, but you're also trying to predict activation order, because players choose which board regions resolve first after they've already put the workers out. That is a really cool concept that is, in my opinion, is pretty unique and offers this like awesome layer of strategy that I feel very few games are replicating. And I love the time patron contracts too. Patrons shower you with gifts every round, but their patience is like super thin. If you don't finish their instrument that they want and like the symphony they want to hear, they'll just walk away, forcing you to balance short-term benefits for sort of long-term commitments. It's a clever like push and pull system that is just another plate you have to sort of juggle while you're playing. Now, I've only played this game a few times, but it's already an S tier territory for me. I don't know if that'll go down, but we will see, because I'm going to keep playing it. This is definitely in the running for one of my favorite games of the year. This is an S tier game. I love it. And next up is Neuroshima Hex Battle. Neuroshima Hex Battle is a fast, tactical 2-player showdown where asymmetric factions clash on a hex grid using clever tile placement, timing, and chain reaction combat to outmaneuver and destroy the enemy headquarters. Now, Neuroshima Hex Battle is essentially the streamlined 2-player focused version of the classic tactics game. Though, let's be honest, okay? Most people were already playing it 2-player anyway. But regardless, it's just a cool excuse to finally talk about it on this channel, because I don't think we've ever covered this game before. So obviously, like probably most of you, I played the shit out of this game on my phone. It is an amazing app. But I have always been reluctant to actually own the game. But Portal sent us a copy over, and I figured like, oh, I might as well give it a shot and see how freaking, if it's any good in person. There's so many awesome tactical decisions to be made in this game, that you're constantly adapting to everything your opponent is doing, and every new hand of tiles gives you this new chance to feel like you're pulling off something smart and clever. It has loads of cool powers and neat ways to interact with the pieces on the board, all while engaging in a really intense spatial puzzle where you're constantly balancing, maneuvering your troops to the right spots to attack the headquarters, all while making sure that yours is heavily defended. Now, obviously, the only thing that I think keeps this game from being an S tier is the damn upkeep, which of course is perfectly handled in the app. It could be a little tough and not particularly enjoyable to go through and activate each individual tile in initiative order when that battle starts, especially when the nets are being removed from pieces and pieces are being removed from the board. And this, this piece has been upgraded in its attack while this piece is activating earlier because of this module. It's tough, but you know what? I don't care. The game it is very fun and a great 2-player experience. I might even go and get more content, which I know I should avoid, because I'm fairly certain there's probably a ton of stuff for this game. But let me know in the comment section where you think I would start if I wanted to branch out a bit more. As the battle system itself, though, like as this 2-player only version, one released this year, I think it's good. I think it's a really good game. I would give this an A. This is an A tier game. And next is Magical Athlete. Magical Athlete is a dumb as hell roll and move racing game where you draft a team of bizarre cartoon characters, each with wildly broken abilities, and race them across a simple track over multiple rounds. Let me just say that this is not the style of game we typically enjoy. In fact, it's exactly the kind of thing we usually avoid. And yet, we played this twice at a convention and had a stupidly good time. This game is so insanely dumb. Nothing is balanced, the powers are absolutely, they break the game, and sometimes you'll have characters that will just make the experience less fun for someone at the table if they're taking this thing seriously. And honestly, I just don't give a shit. Like, because in the moment, it's just stupid and it's fun. And sometimes you want stupid fun. The key though is that the game doesn't overstay its welcome. It knows exactly what it is, and it's in and out before you have time to sit there and go like, wait, is this a game? You roll, you move, something ridiculous happens, you laugh, and then it's on to the next race basically. At the start, you draft 4 racers. You'll compete across 4 different races, and what's kind of cool is that you know what's in the pool. So you can grab characters that piggyback off of other players' abilities. So there is like a tiny bit of strategy in how you draft and when you leverage certain powers, but that's absolutely not why you're here. You're here to watch someone eat it when they pass your banana dude, you know, or to see the giant mouth character literally remove someone from the race. You're going to be on the losing end of a lot of bullshit. But if you go in with the right mindset, the game just turns into a story generator you'll be laughing about for like ages to come. This is just good quality, lowbrow, dumb fun that I'm really pleased with. I'm looking forward to owning this one day myself. I would give this an A tier. This is an A tier game. And next is Garden Lake. Garden Lake is a tile laying game where you're filling up your personal board with weirdly shaped garden and water tiles, occasionally unlocking bonus pieces when you cover specific printed shapes. I might have to start a petition here. No more tile laying games, Rosenberg. You've had enough. You're drunk. Go home. This is yet another one that feels like every other tile laying game I have ever played. Except here, the shapes are not your usual Tetris pieces, but these dreadfully awkward and painfully annoying blobs that you can rarely visualize fitting perfectly on your personal board. And what's the twist? Well, if you cover this little square on the board, you get a tiny 1x1 piece to place for free. And if you cover this like weird L shape, you get an L-shaped piece. Amazing. Wow. There's no tension here or sense of buildup. It never feels like you're actually accomplishing much of anything. You basically just lay your tiles down, plunk pieces in where they fit, if they do fit, and then the game suddenly ends. And hey, you get some points for little groups of fish or lily pads. How about other people? The other people that are sitting at the table playing with you? Don't forget them. They're just dead to you. At most, you can draft tiles from the front spots in front of them, like on the 2 bottom pieces. I think that's supposed to simulate some sort of like river flow, and I guess that's where the interaction comes in, but it's boring. It's boring. You don't interact in any sort of meaningful way with anybody else at the table. I strongly dislike this game. The people I played with, they enjoyed it because I think they're crazy. I give this a C. It's mediocre. It's fine. And next is Wispwood. Wispwood is a tile laying game where you're drafting tree tiles and little wisp tokens to build your own forest tableau. Would you like another tile laying game? Well, you are in luck. I will say that Wispwood does play a little differently, which is nice. Your points are primarily coming from the wisps that you draft along with the tree tiles. And each game, there are cards associated with each wisp type that determines how the wisp score. I hate saying wisp. The wisps score. So you end up with a lot of like variability between games, and to be fair, they're typically pretty interesting, and it is enjoyable navigating those scoring objectives and trying to balance them all together to sort of maximize points. Now, is there any interaction? No, because I guess at some point someone have passed a law after playing Carcassonne and stated that like from now on tile layers will have no interaction. You'll just sit beside people and you just forget that they're there. They're dead to you. But I know that's sort of part and parcel for this genre these days. But this is your typical, like, I took a thing that maybe you might have taken. That's your level of interaction that this game provides. Now, I'm sounding like a tile laying hater, and I am not, okay? This one does offer enough difference to warrant repeat plays. It's enjoyable, and I think it's a good game. I appreciate like how all the trees you took, which are just generic tiles, get removed between rounds, and then you sort of have to like, you rebuild around the existing wisps. I'm just going to say fairies. You build around those existing fairies. It's a cool touch, and it does provide a unique challenge that gets your brain active as you have to adapt to your new board layout for every round. Honestly, it's a very competent game. I enjoy it. I won't say no to playing it, but I don't know if I'd own it myself. We'll see. I would give this, it's a B. It's a B tier game. And next is a game that surprised both Kim and I at PAX this year, Aspens. Aspens is a two-player abstract strategy game where you're placing trees on a shared hex map and trying to wall your opponents off from juicy scoring areas. You're essentially growing little forests in specific directions based on dice rolls that represent the wind. Now, this game is very similar to a game Kim and I really love called Hey, That's My Fish. It has that exact same thing that we really like, where you're using a spatial puzzle to the best of your abilities, doing your best to sort of cut off your opponent from various portions of a map by perfectly placing your trees and like just in their way. I really like that. And it's what I saw in last year's Loot. I also really enjoyed it there too. And the cool thing is, and I think what differentiates it from the Hey, That's My Fish, is that there feels like there's a lot more going on, which is nice. It sort of adds more game to the experience. Each turn you roll 2 dice to determine both the direction you're allowed to place your trees, which is called the wind, and the tree's value you're working with. So the number of trees you can actually spawn is then based on how many hexes already contain stacks of trees with that number or higher. So you're constantly weighing whether to extend a line of trees to cut your opponent off or pile more trees into a single hex to improve your future spawn potential. It's a clean little decision space that ties the rolling and placement together really nicely. Yeah, this is definitely Kim and I's like hidden gem of packs. I think this is one that you should check out. It is a very cool two-player game. I actually think it plays more than 2 players with some expansions and stuff, but so far we've just played the base game a few times and we're digging it. We're loving it. I would give this an A tier, and again, I think this is going to be one game it will be on one of our top 10 lists of the year. I guarantee it. A tier game. And next is Fea's Swamp. Fea's Swamp is a medium-weight Euro boat sailing around a shared swamp, catching fish, selling them on other players' buildings, and upgrading your own little settlements with new powers. I have no idea how this game just became so incredibly hyped. This damn thing, this game sold out 30 minutes before the first day at Eschenspiel, before it opened. And and they weren't allowed to sell the game before conventions opened. So shame on you guys. People were waiting in that line, that convention line, for a hell of a long time to not get the game that they really wanted because exhibitors and content creators got it first. I can't imagine how fucking irritated those people would have been. I really hope that like the convention center like reprimanded the company. I hope they did something because, okay, well, let's just get to the game. Sorry. It's a good game. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed my time with it, and you can clearly see the Terra Mystica influence in the powers and that you draft between the rounds, and the fish that are available that sort of functions like round scoring, just significantly less interesting. This one leans hard into positive interaction. You fish, then sell those fish in other players' buildings, giving yourself coins now and then victory points for them later. It's a cool decision space because you're getting that like quick hit of cash, but in the long run, you're just helping somebody else. That said, the rewards here you're working toward often feel a little underwhelming. The cash goes toward building your settlements, which can give you bonus player powers, but most of those powers felt a little bland, like get an extra worker, fish one more fish, get another boat. It's not bad, it's just not particularly fun or exciting to accomplish an upgrade. You've also got public objective cards that lose value as each player completes them, so you get that like familiar race element layered over everything, which is fine, I guess. The game does a great job of encouraging a ton of movement on the shared board, which is something I did enjoy. You're constantly sailing to new fishing spots, new buildings you can deliver to when the other ones you came from are full, and the torches on the edges of the boards that you can go to, they just kind of give you points. You just kind of pick them up. I hate them. I hate that action. It's really boring. This is a game you really want higher player counts for, 3 or 4 maybe, because at lower counts it starts to feel very sandboxy and like directionless with way less competition and interaction. I sound like a hater. It's a fine game. It's a competent game. It's just not a particularly interesting game. And I think the hyping going into this game kind of hurt it. And it's sort of like, I think a lot of people were expecting a lot and they might not have got what they were expecting. We were one of those groups. I give Fea's Swamp, I give it a C. It's a fine game. And next is Formidable Farm. Formidable Farm is a very light contract fulfillment resource conversion game where you walk a single pawn around a tiny little board collecting resources and playing cards to gradually shed your deck. Every turn I played this game, I kept wondering when the game would actually start. I moved my single little pawn around on this tiny board and collected resources, playing some of the most boring contract cards I've ever encountered, all while trying to get rid of my entire hand. There's just nothing interesting here. You simply deal with the hand you're dealt and maybe use the contract cards in the open draft area to grab a few extra resources. And I get it, you know, it's a light game. It's supposed to be easy to understand to play. But the thing is, it's just, it lacks any semblance of depth. And it's just not for my personal preferences. I find the game a little mind numbing. And all this to say nothing of the fact that the damn thing doesn't feel balanced. Like, there are some contract cards you can get, okay, that you can get stuck with that require you to take more cards into your deck. And the rewards for these cards is only a couple of resources. You're actively hurting your chances of winning by adding the very thing you're supposed to be subtracting from. And the problem is you could end up with a deck with way more of these types of cards than your opponent. And in which case, you're not going to win. You know, like, I don't know. It was silly. I didn't like it. I do love the art. I'm trying to say positive things here. I'm trying to stay positive. I love the attempt at simplicity and the distillation of like a pure contract fulfillment and worker placement experience, especially at a time when every game is just sort of like overflowing with a hodgepodge of mechanics. But you've got to give me something interesting here, and there just isn't anything here. You're not building toward anything. There's no engine here. You can't really plan beyond 1 or 2 tactical moves for another card in your hand. The game just kind of stops when your cards are done, and it doesn't feel fulfilling when the game is over. But, you know, give it a look for yourself. Maybe I'm in minority here. I don't know. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this one, but I don't like this game. Kim didn't like this game. I would give it a solid, juicy D. And next is Covenant. Covenant is a dwarven euro where you place workers to dig tunnels, build structures, fight monsters, and ship resources on a shared contracts while navigating a dense underground labyrinth of upgrades and bonuses. If you have ever wanted a game that feels like your dopamine receptors are being bombarded by constant pleasure and reward, this is the game for you. You perform a single action, and then suddenly that one action is like cascading into other actions and bonuses. It's a type of game where other players look at you while you're on your turn and think you're cheating because you just picked up so much shit from off the board. Now, this is a double-edged sword. Yes, it feels awesome that every turn feels impactful and sort of stimulating. It's nice when a game gives you that feeling of like the perfect turn, even if it's not technically the most efficient turn. But it also means you can sometimes get lost mid-turn. I've had several moments where conversation broke out and someone asked me something. I paused to respond and then completely lost track of what the hell I was doing. That might be a me problem, but the game absolutely facilitates this issue. Let me know in the comments what you've made, what games you think are the worst for that, because this one felt this one felt like it'd be the top of the list. Like, seriously, I was just like, there were so many times I just got lost. Like, what the hell was I doing again? Again, that might be me problem. The actions themselves are fairly simple. You build, you dig for resources, you reveal new tiles, you kill monsters, and you ship your resources out in a sort of like shared contract system on the board. All these actions provide benefits and rewards that are both immediate and long-term, because you're also moving up tracks. Because, you know, it might be dwarves digging tunnels, but brother, you're still playing a Euro game, and Euro games mean tracks, lots and lots of tracks. But the tracks do work well here, with lots of rewards along the way, and endgame scoring where you further you get up certain tracks, the more points you squeeze out of the path. You can also add additional actions to your board when you're placing workers, so you can repeat actions or slap little like medals on them to provide even more rewards and bonuses when you take those actions. On top of that, you can upgrade your little dwarf dudes, sort of like Caverna, making them more powerful and able to get more out of every action. It's a game with a lot of variability. I've played a few times now, and every game has felt pretty distinct from the last. I think it's because that constant bombardment of stuff. I'm really digging it, pun intended. I look forward to playing it some more. As it stands right now, this is one of my favorite Devere games released since White Castle. It is a good game. I would give this an A tier. It's an A tier game. And next is Brink. Brink is a highly interactive worker placement game with trading, exploration, researching cool ship parts, and hidden voting that sees players, you guessed it, trying to get the most victory points. I love how there's a lot of player interaction here. You can see slight nods to Catan as you're playing, like constantly trading your resources to other players is enjoyable, and actually didn't bog the playtime down too much, because you can't keep the resources you get in front of your screen for longer than your own turn, so you're sort of incentivized to sometimes take suboptimal deals, but the rest of the group keeps people in check from that much, because, like, you know, if you offer somebody shitty deals, they're probably going to offer you shitty deals. And you really have to get into other people's minds to figure out what faction color they're going to want to score for the round, which just like, it's just more interaction. That goes beyond simply blocking a location somewhere that someone might want to go to. You feel really clever when you want one area to score badly, but you see someone else also wants that, and so you bid a little to nothing on your turn for that area, knowing they'll spend the resources to make it happen for you. Or you just end up feeling like an idiot because they thought the exact same damn thing, and now both of you score nothing because you're relying on the other person to do all the bidding. Uh, it's annoying, but when it happens, it is pretty funny. One problem I have with the game, though, is that it's only 3 rounds, and that first round can sometimes feel a little meandering and directionless. You don't really know what colors you should be focusing on because it's too early to tell. So everyone is just sort of like going up for upgrades or more action cards because they make the most sense, making the first round feel a little repetitive after a few plays. Definitely on the first time we played, and then it felt that way kind of on the second and third time too. And the game needs a bit more variety and variability to really be amazing. Like only having 2 paths when you're using the upgrade action, because you kind of go like left or you go right, it's a little boring. And when you have those like halfway points, because when you upgrade, there's like those little points between when you actually get something, it's really unfulfilling, and I don't like stuff like that. Like you should give the player something, I feel. But again, maybe that's just my opinion and how we feel when we play the game. I sound like I'm being harsh all of a sudden, and well, it's kind of because I am, but mostly because I see a lot of potential here. But still, yeah, I do really like Brink. I want to keep playing it, and I want to see how the meta evolves over time as we're playing it. Like, I think this will be something we're definitely going to keep it in my collection because I think Kim loved it. So I would give this a B. It's a B tier for now. I think this game, out of many of the games I played this year, has the strongest potential to go up. We shall see. But for B, B for now. And next is White Castle Duel. White Castle Duel is a 2-player head-to-head version of the White Castle where you're placing workers on a tight shared board to jockey for control of the castle's locations, climb tracks, and time your actions efficiently to grab loads and loads of symbols. This is a very good game, and it really does, I think it stands on its own. Each action feels very fulfilling, and each turn is interesting. Instead of dice, I'm placing one of my 6 workers on a lantern spot and performing the 2 actions adjacent to the lantern. And all that, and I'm receiving the benefits of the lantern color I cover. There's a lot of depth here and various layers of strategy to consider on every single turn. And it's all sort of neatly bundled into a 30-minute game. It is a good game. And once all those workers are placed, well, now I take whichever tokens I want back onto my board and perform more actions. It's a really tight 12-turn game where efficiency and comboing is absolutely pivotal to winning, which of course is also very similar to White Castle. And what you're trying to do is to get as many symbols as you can through various means to benefit the areas you're focusing on, be they the warriors, the farms, or the courtiers. I I love the abundance of cards that you've accumulated in this game and how they have to be flipped to score. I love looking at my opponents and checking out their color tokens and accurately guessing, at least sometimes, where I think they're going to be going and then sort of acting accordingly. This is a very good two-player game. Do I like it more than the White Castle? I do not. But I do think this one is great, and it plays even quicker in some ways. I'd be curious of whether or not we decide to keep it during a Trash or Treasure segment. But for now, I would give this an A. It's an A-tier game. It is very good. And next is Pinched. Pinched is a game that sees players secretly playing cards to guess the location of the mastermind in an effort to weasel in on his ill-gotten gains, all in an effort to become the richest criminal at the table. This was a really delightful sort of party-ish game that has hit our table a few times this year. I really enjoy like the social head games that are being played out in every game. Like you have to try and guess where the mastermind is going among the 5 locations of cards that he has in his hand. And if you look closely and you pay attention, you can perform that task pretty damn well. But what's cool is that, well, that they know you're trying to do that. So they'll sometimes pick the path less obvious. And maybe you know that they know they're going to, you get what I'm saying. I don't have to repeat that joke. But I admit you will sometimes have some players who just can't seem to guess right. And while the game does allow them to get a card from the river, they won't win unless they make a really good calculated guesses, at least sometimes. Because when you get to the mastermind's locations, you get to squeeze in on the loot that he collects instead of him getting all of it for himself. And the loot itself is essentially just set collection, which you have to sell when you become the mastermind on your turn. And each of the rooms offers some really cool abilities to throw a wrench into the whole thing. Like one has you searching for the Lisa Mona, which is like the Timu Mona Lisa, I suppose. And another one has you getting like a dog companion that can get more goods. All of these rooms just add more layers of choices you need to swim through to determine the mastermind's ideal location. Yeah, I really like this one. I've only played it twice so far, but for now, I think I'm gonna go with a B. I'm gonna go with a B, but I think this one has a strong potential to go into the A tier category because it's one of those games that's like a step up from a party game. Like it's light, you can have fun with it. Yeah, this is a good game, really good game. And next is The Dark Quarter. The Dark Quarter is a cooperative, app-driven mystery game set in a grimy, supernatural New Orleans, where you and your crew of investigators roll dice, test skills, and watch as the game unfolds without you even in the room. Man, I really wanted to love this game. I really did. Like, I love Van Ryder games. Final Girl is great, and Detective City of Angels is among my favorite games at this point. I love how they always seem to put out games that are more like sort of adult orientated in their themes because it gets a little tiresome continually seeing this like uh, family-friendly theme slop that, that comes through the pipeline with every new release of other games. It's nice to have games that are a bit more gritty. So for this game, you take on the role of an investigator with loads of flaws, and you're trying to find redemption. And you do that by chucking lots and lots of dice and doing skill checks, which also feels strange when I'm playing a detective, since I assume the emphasis should be on me using the semblance of deduction to solve cases, like in City of Angels. You have to be smart and clever and, do your best to figure things out. Here, I just chuck dice and I read story beats. And the game is like heavily dependent on that app. And while I can sometimes forgive that in other games, here it just becomes all consuming. Like it feels like I'm constantly scanning QR codes and reading story bits from my phone. It's just it's not a pleasurable experience from my opinion. I tried solo and it was also not a particularly good experience. I had to play two-handed and the whole thing made me feel like I was playing Dragon's Lair and just like pressing a button now and then and just watching as the story kind of does its own thing, regardless of my in presence or my input. And the damn app like seems to manage like every piece in the game, leaving me to wonder why I'm at the table. What am I doing here? Why am I playing a board game? I could just play a video game. I don't know. So I tried again with 3 players and read all the story bits out loud to make it a bit more thematic. Man, there's just no game here. I love the bits of writing, but these skill checks are just so damn boring, and the mechanics behind them, they're just unimaginative and uninteresting. Just let me make a decision. Like, let me have some say in the story that's unfolding. So like Vantage, it's a dud for me. It's a D tier game. It's a shame. Like I said, I love the company. I love the other stuff they do. This one just flopped for me. It's unfortunate. And next is Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era is a cooperative dungeon crawl style adventure where you and your party of heroes roam around Tamriel, upgrading your hero and chucking handfuls of dice in big tactical battles. I'm really gonna have to try Too Many Bones solo because I am digging Elder Scrolls a lot playing it by myself. There are a good amount of differences here that makes the entire system feel a little smoother in my opinion. Let me know in the comment section if there's some sort of like errata to Too Many Bones that makes it better, because the first time I played it was like right at release. So I don't know if it's made better now with some expansions. But yeah, this game, the Elder Scrolls, I'm really loving. The game is easily one of the better dungeon crawlers I've played in a very long time. I think it's deeper than almost 95% of these types of games, and it rewards heavy time investment. I've mostly played solo so far, and I had a ton of fun with it, especially since you can get the damn campaign done in like 3 sessions, which is exactly what I want because my friends and I can't remember what happens between big ass long sessions when weeks or sometimes months between us playing. Upgrading your character and all the weight of that decision-making process is a gigantic portion of the game, and it's an enjoyable and fulfilling one. I think this is probably the best bit of hero or character building in a board game that I've perhaps ever seen. And because the runs in this game are so short, you actually get pretty damn excited to start all over again and make an entirely new character trying new and like better and interesting things. The combat here is interesting and typically fairly tense. I was impressed with how most battles didn't feel too easy or too hard, which is something I notice a lot of campaign games struggle with often. Engaging with the cooldown track and deciding who to hit and when and how to position myself. It was all very engaging and enjoyable. And yeah, obviously the roll of the dice and the luck it plays a big factor in that enjoyment. But hell, even with bad luck, it's just fun using my special abilities. There's a lot going on in this game. The rulebook is really big. You need a lot of time to get really into it, but it's a damn good game. It is going to be one of the few S's I give out this year. Yeah, great game. Next, we have Kinfire Council. Kinfire Council is a worker placement game where players attempt to rebuild the city by collecting resources, upgrading buildings, all while dealing with a nefarious cult who is attempting to ruin the city and get in the player's way. This is worker placement to the extreme. There are like 20 different areas you can go in on the main board. And each of these areas wasn't overwhelming enough. You can also upgrade all of them to make them even more powerful and sometimes offer different things. And many of those spots have 2 different actions on the tile. Thankfully, none of the actions are complicated, so the breadth of options on any given turn, it's more fun than it is like overwhelming and annoying. There's also this like little cult that runs around messing things up and getting in the way, which functions as like a clever little way to like limit choices in a round and yet simultaneously offer more choices since you can deal with them in a variety of ways to gain resources and score points. They also employ threats which impact the entire city. So think like an event card type thing. They function as a cool way to almost feel like you're somewhat being cooperative in an otherwise competitive game. Now, my issue with it is that it's trying too many things at once because it also engages in a little politics. You can vote on these like decrees that pop up during the round and make certain things impacting the board or scoring occur. Now, since they typically just benefit the person voting on them, there isn't a lot of incentive to have other people assist. So at best, you just end up getting players fighting for majority. It sort of slows things down a bit, despite being a pretty cool idea. I'm sounding like I'm starting to dislike the game, and you're surprised to know that I do not. I do not. I think it's a very good game, and I am tempted to put this on my top 10 list. I don't know if it'll end up there, but it is a solid game. I would give this an A tier. Yeah, I'm really digging this one. I know Kim loves it. I think she'll have it on our top 10. Great game, A tier. And next up is Dragon Eclipse. In Dragon Eclipse, players can befriend mistlings, elemental creatures roaming the land, to complete their personal quests, grow and train them, discover cards, and build powerful decks to make their mistlings even stronger. This was an enjoyable and relatively light deck builder that lets me relive my Magic days by opening booster packs, which is honestly pretty damn fun. I know many people compared it to Pokemon, and it really is not an unfair comparison. It really is like damn cool collecting these like monsters and filling out this like encyclopedia with your newly acquired like mistlings. And it made the game more interesting than simply beating the monsters. You basically try and complete these objectives to take their HP down to a certain level, or you lure them to a specific spot if you want to capture them. It adds more spice to combat, which was really needed because over time combat started feeling very repetitive. And I think that's because the options you have on any given turn on these cards is not entirely creative and engaging. And the scenarios themselves don't really offer a ton of twists on the gameplay to keep me interested and craving more between sessions. The choose your own adventure portion of the game, which seems to be all the rage these days, was well executed, but mostly because this game, like many of the other ones that use a choose your own adventure style system, has a game attached to it, which is good. Not like Vantage. But the exploration attached to those choices did feel a little dry, and results of the various story encounters felt a little random. But the weird story beats were not enough to sour me on the entire thing. I do wish, though, that the game had a little more depth than it does, which perhaps isn't fair to demand that from this game. But when you give me a gigantic box and loads of setup time and play time, you are probably going to have to give me something a little heavier to make the entire experience a bit more worth it. Like the reason I can put up with something like Frostpunk is because there is a ton to sink your teeth into and feel like the warm-up crap that you had to go through was sort of worth it. Here, it didn't really feel that way, but this is a good game. All in all, I think I'm torn between like a high C and a low B on this one. I think I'm gonna go high C. If I want to put in the B, but I feel like the only thing that's putting in B would be my to relive my glory Pokemon days. But this game, it is a decent game. It's worth playing. I kind of bounced off it, but it is worth trying. And next is Old King's Crown. Old King's Crown is a game of card-driven conquest where you play as heirs to a vacant throne, vying for control of an ancient, overgrown kingdom. Old King's Crown has literally, it just has everything I love in a board game. It has hidden information and bluffing. It has loads of wonderfully mean plays. It has player powers that you start the game with and that you obtained throughout the course of the game. I've played 3 times now. Once online with a couple of dudes from Discord, shout out to those guys who taught me the game, and a few times in person with a friend's copy, and every single time I've had a really good time. If you haven't joined the Discord, definitely do. I have got a lot of these people just teaching me games because I always have a ton of stuff I need to get through. And plus, they even play games on their own. It's a really good community and it's grown like really fast. We went from like I think 3 or 4 people in there to like almost 80 now. There are so many different powers you can obtain during the game, and each one has to be bid for, which means you have this sort of like agonizing decision to make to decide if you want to part with one of your precious cards to snag that ability, or do you hold on to that card for the battles? Old King's Crown is the type of game that has you thinking like multiple turns ahead and allows for like loads of different options, despite the fact that you're mostly just playing from a fairly limited hand of cards, which thankfully makes the entire process in any given season very smooth and very easy to understand. And their powers are all like they're creative too. Like none of the abilities felt samey, and honestly, I haven't even seen them all yet. So I'm excited to keep playing. Also, they were all pretty easy to manage. I never felt in my plays that I was like forgetting what my opponents could do. The area majority portion of this game is actually really well done. It's only like 3 areas you're battling over, and each player is an active participant in every battle because you always get to play a card. And the battles were actually really enjoyable because even after you play a card, because you had these like one-time use powers and various other abilities, you always felt like you had options to change the tides of battle to your favor. They were engaging and they didn't have the typical like, well, I'm alone here, so I guess I take the prize. All said, it's very rare I play a game and feel as though I'm playing something entirely unique. This game reminds me of no other game really, and that's a really wonderful experience. And the fact that this is a first-time designer, just great work, Pablo. I love it. This is a really, really great game. I would give this an easy S tier game. This is guaranteed to be on my top 10, if not top 3. It's a completely divisive game, and I would never like if somebody told me they absolutely hated it, I would be like, yes, I understand that. I love it, but I understand why you hate it. And next up is Tend. Tend is a flip and write game that sees players building up their own farm, mining mountains, fishing, and collecting goods to send back to Zenith headquarters to study. It's basically the premise of Stardew Valley, but without the dead grandpa. I was very reluctant to bother with this game after hearing about the scratching and stamping bit. It's I'm all for trying new things, but sometimes those things just scream gimmicky. It also has simultaneous play, which typically means little to no interaction, so I had a lot of red flags going into this one. But I feel like I was wrong. I mean, like, yeah, there was zero meaningful interaction in this game, but the puzzle the game provides me is good enough to have me playing by myself. Now, you can gift your neighbors resources, which I suppose is nice, and the game does this like cute thing where the person who is the most neighborly, I think the game calls it, gets extra points, but that's mostly it. But back to the puzzle. It is very good. Each action, be it fishing or mining or whatever, all function as separate mini games, and each one is interesting. It has a sort of like slow start, but as the game progresses, you eventually find yourself getting lost in these like long cascading turns filled with combos. So if that's something you enjoy, this game is sort of a no-brainer. Thankfully, those turns are helped by the simultaneous play because, man, if I had to wait for other people to do their comboing bullshit while I twiddled my thumbs, I would hate this game. Yeah, I think this game might even replace Hadrian's Wall for me and Kim. I would give this an A. I would give this an A tier. And this is another one of these games that I'm guaranteeing right now it's going to be on Kim's top 10, but it is a great game. Next up is Black Rose War Duel. Black Rose War Duel is a 2-player version of Black Rose Rebirth, where players go head-to-head as mages, blasting their opponents, summoning cool monsters, and rebuilding the lodge, all to be crowned the best mage in the business. Okay, let's just get this out of the way. Black Rose War Rebirth is one of the greatest board games of all time, in my opinion. It has easily cracked my top 10 list of all time. I love it to death. I have way too much stuff for this game. I love how silly it can be. I love how broken the spells feel. I love the confrontational aspect of the game and just feeling like you're this like badass mage just zapping shit, just killing your friends with these like cool combos. It's just constant fun. But the big question is, can it play 2 players well? And that's essentially what Duel is here to accomplish. Now, all the phases remain pretty much the same. You do a bit of programming by laying down your spell cards in the sequence you want to cast them in, and then everyone reveals and you run around sort of just zapping and summoning big-ass monsters, and doing some of the best area majority gaming in the business. But the problem I have with this is that is that if you're going from Rebirth, the full game, to this, it feels like I'm playing something that's a little stripped down and has a lot less variability. This is for sure a wonderful way to introduce yourself to the system, and yet it's in a weird place because I would rather you try the original game at 4 players rather than this game at 2. Now, you can play this with the Avatar, which is basically like an AI player. We tried this and it does function very well, but I've never been a fan of artificially controlled players. It feels weird, but it's an option just to be aware of. But I think just without the extra players, the area majority craziness is sort of lost, and it feels like you showed up to a party with like with one other guest in the room. It's awkward. Although for Rebirth fans, you'll of course be happy to hear that most of the things in this game can be ported into the original game, which honestly is the primary reason. It's the primary reason I got this game. Yeah, I would give this a B tier, and it hurts to say that, but as a 2 player game, I don't think it functions as well, but it's still good. And next is Lightning Train. Lightning Train is a bag builder that sees players opening stations and train lines across a shared map to deliver goods and fulfill contracts and do your typical train shit. There are lots of cool, like mutually beneficial interactions occurring in this game, like delivering goods so that everyone who owns the train line and the station used to ship those goods receives a little something something. Despite being a mean player, I do enjoy these types of like quality, everybody benefits interactions once in a while. But of course, the biggest hook here and what's supposed to separate it from the traditional train game is its reliance on bag building. You pull those chits out of the bag, quack style, deciding if they go on your personal board or on the shared map as trains. And what's cool is that you can store a couple of chits between turns. That sounds like a dumb thing to be interested by, but I always like that option in bag building, sort of like Orleans, and it's not that common. But it is really necessary here because it's tough to get those actions to fire that you want if you don't draw the chits that you need. And I think that's kind of the big issue with this game is that you're either going to love or hate it. It's restricting and it demands you pivot on your strategy for a turn really fast because there are going to be a lot of turns where you might have this plan in your head to do the thing that you want, but then you don't pull out what you need to get it done. And so you have to change fast. And sometimes the game provides an avenue for that, and sometimes it just doesn't. And the start of the game can be a bit of a slog. You pull your chits from the bag, get a dollar here or there, complete a contract maybe, and just sort of rinse and repeat for a while. But eventually you start buying the stuff you really want and you do get better contracts. It felt as though the process was becoming a little tedious and there wasn't a ton in this game to really like jazz everything up or make that slow ramp up sort of worth the journey. I'll admit I've only played this game twice, but I'm gonna rank it anyway. I'm struggling here between like a C and a B. I'm I sound like I dislike it, but I don't. I'm just not as impressed as the hype sort of led me to believe. So I'd go with a B. This is a good game. And next up is Ada's Dream. Ada's Dream sees players fulfilling Ada's vision in an alternative history Euro game that has players taking dice from the workshop rundown to give lectures, travel to the UK, and complete assignments, all to get the most prestige points. This game just provides this great decision space where you're either drafting a die or using a previously taken die to perform an action on the board. Now, each of these decisions is sort of like layered because the die comes from a specific spot on the rondel that gives you a benefit. I like stuff like that. It's one of the main reasons I really enjoy Tiletum because it's asking you to make some tough decisions for the benefits that you sort of need in the moment. And the die you take goes on your own board that contributes to endgame scoring because if you already took a program tile, you get to consider how that die you took lines up with the requirements of the tile. It's like a really solid puzzle and the game is offering you a ton of things to do and keep track of, which makes the entire experience, at least for me, pretty damn enjoyable. Yeah, the various things you do are sort of like all mini games, whether it's, area majority or route building or deck building. But I think that game does a really good job of sort of connecting them all pretty nicely and having them all sort of like feed into one another like a big old computer system, basically. And the combos the game generates are all like they're really fulfilling and like pleasurable without being too complicated to bog the entire game down. It's also really nice figuring out, where to draft dice or take actions by watching other players and prioritizing what I should do based on what I think they'll need to do. I think this is the type of game you walk away from after a play and start thinking like you should have done X or Y, like differently. And when that happens, when it's a day later and I'm thinking about the game, it's always a good sign that you're playing like a quality game. Every once in a while, I come across these like dry as hell Euros I should not like Carnegie or Tiletum. This is this year's like a dry Euro banger, I think. I would give this, I would say solid A. This is a really good game. And next up is Aquaria. Aquaria is a management game that sees players competing to build and maintain the most impressive aquarium by purchasing fish and aquatic plants, balancing oxygen and water quality to get the most points possible. I think Aquaria has a lot of interesting ideas, but ultimately it felt as though the game was trying to do too many things at once, and some of the portions of the game felt a little unnecessary, like I don't know, like the filtrations. Since you're only going to complete, let's say that track, for example, like two, maybe three times in any given game. It's doing a lot of things, but it's not really doing all of them really well. I like placing my fish cards on the board, but the game really isn't doing much to make that experience that enjoyable or even that strategic. You know, you connect some symbols together, fill some rows, and turn some dials. There doesn't feel like there's a lot here that is creative or particularly engaging. The action placement mechanic is a little boring, where the twist here is that you only get the extra bonus resource from the placement if you go to the spot that's adjacent to your current spot, which really isn't enough to make the portion of the game particularly interesting. And there is like no interaction in this game. Even hate drafting isn't that important because there are six fish cards on the display at any given time. So something is going to be there that's going to benefit your opponent, whether or not you want to hate draft or not. And the worker pawns, they don't interact with one another at all. Like just let a brother toss a piranha card like into my opponent's fishbowl, please. Just let me do something. Don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad game by any stretch, and I wouldn't say no to play it. I would say Aquaria is the perfect example of a competent game that doesn't have a lot there to really excite you, but it is very mechanically sound. I think this would be a C. This is a C tier game. And next up is Severton. Severton is a cooperative scenario-based adventure game set in a moody, mysterious version of old 1930s Prague, where players work together to uncover the dark secrets of the titular neighborhood and evade roaming gangs to survive. Severton is it's a pretty cool cooperative game where you rarely feel like you're doing the same thing over and over again, and you experience that familiar grind that a lot of cooperative games seem to suffer from. Here, there is a good variety of different tasks that can pop up throughout the game, and handling the threats via the vaunts is nice and varied as well, since each vaunt could demand a different skill check of the three skill checks available. So you also have a cool decision space where you could choose to push harder and spend all your cards, but doing so leaves you more vulnerable to the actions performed by the vaunts when it's their turn. And I found a lot of different ways to cooperate with other players at the table, beyond the usual delegation of tasks. Here, you're teaming up with other players to accomplish harder tasks, or spreading out if the quest demands it. Either way, it always felt like you're working with people, and to me, that's a big part of me actually enjoying a good cooperative game. And this game is just a great mix of campaign game and sort of I don't know what you want to call it, like non-campaign game. Since two of the quest packs are of the, I think, five or six, are ones that can be replayed over and over and over again. Since they come with a big fat stack of individual quests, and they can all sort of be randomized. So you don't have to play, story beat A down to story beat Z. I think I would give this an A. I think there's some of a bias in me because I do just love the designer and I love everything he does. But I do think this is a quality cooperative experience. Yeah, it's an A. And next up is March of the Ants. March of the Ants Evolved Edition is a fast-playing 4X strategy game where players lead rival ant colonies to explore a growing meadow, evolve their ants into new species, and fight for control for territory and resources. There was a lot of fun in all the variety of cards in this game, but that variety in all the combos that a player can perform can really give someone the edge over other players. But of course, that's sort of it's balanced by other players and understanding who's getting a little too far ahead, since you can simply siege that player's areas and boot them from their resource nodes if necessary. But it's something to be cognizant of. This is a game where people can snowball. But this is the type of area control game that I typically enjoy because it offers a lot of ways to navigate that mechanic and engage with that system that goes beyond simply having the most of something in an area. Here, you can play a card during the battles that adds to your strength value, and the upgrades you obtain throughout the game, I think the head ones, can further increase that strength. Plus, it's nice that you're actually fighting for something beyond simply victory points. If you win a battle in this game on a hex, you can occupy the resource nodes and get the spoils they would have received during production. You essentially just kick them off the nodes. The game also has some like really neat players controlled scoring mechanisms through the scoring cards that you can employ to either emphasize a tactic you're proficient in or give you room to sort of pivot and try something different if something's just not working. And I really enjoy that lead and follow mechanic that's used here. Although here it's not something like Puerto Rico, it is less impactful and less powerful since you do like a lesser version of the primary player's action. However, you still feel it, and those moments they can come in clutch sometimes, despite being a much smaller action. And it's kind of cool that it's only your neighbors. So if you're playing four players, whoever you're like kitty corner to, you're not going to experience their actions. Only the people on your left and on your right. I think for now, I would give this a very strong B, and I could see this going to the A category. I'd like to try this with a few other groups that are a bit more cutthroat with area majority games and see how my experience differs with them. But for now, it's a strong B. And next up is Moon Colony.
Bloodbath.
Moon Colony Bloodbath is a chaotic engine builder and engine losing card game where players attempt to build and sustain a moon colony while navigating a series of absolute destruction and death. This is just a like super unique game that I could totally understand if someone were to tell me they despised it. I would get it. Like this game is not for everyone. But what I love is that it's attempting something entirely unique. It sort of feels like Galaxy Trucker and how it allows you to build something up that feels very satisfying, only to have a string of events completely just decimate you. But unlike Galaxy Trucker, you know damn well what's coming, and your goal is to plan for these awful encounters to the best of your ability using your very limited actions in any given round. So it feels like you have a lot more agency than you do in Galaxy Trucker. Like you know there is an event coming that will make you lose money. So why not build a building that prevents that loss or provides you more money elsewhere to act as a sort of band-aid to the issue? It's a game where you don't have to get the most victory points than everyone else. You just have to survive and do your best to like grasp and claw at every little bit of resource your engine, which is which is under constant bombardment, can muster. You need to adapt better than everyone else at the table. Now, is there bad luck in this game that might impact someone more than others? Yeah, of course. But the game, at least in our experience, didn't overstay its welcome. It knows what it is, and it leans into that like crazy energy really well. Yeah, this game, I'm struggling between A and a B because I think mechanically it's sitting around a B, but like the uniqueness and the enjoyment of the experience, it's an A. Why waver? It's an A for sure. And last but not least, Unstoppable. Unstoppable is a cooperative roguelike momentum deck building game that uses the card crafting system to make your character an unstoppable juggernaut that can take on whatever threatens the universe. The deck building in this game is like really cool. Usually you draw cards, but here you create new cards and you add them to your hand. So unlike other deck builders, here you might be building a hand for your current turn that you're actually in, which offers like a lot of tactical versatility and a new way of looking at these style of games. And what's really neat is that these new cards you build to benefit you also turns out to be the bad guys that you have to fight later, which adds this like great extra layer of decision space that you have to consider on every single turn. It's like, is this upgrade's great, but will this upgrade make a monster that I can't handle this turn? I think that card building aspect almost feels like it eliminates the issues you get a lot of other deck builders sort of praying for the perfect card on your next flip. The game takes a really familiar mechanic and does something a little different with it to make the entire play experience a lot more enjoyable. There are some issues though, like a lot of the art is repeated across a variety of cards, which feels super lazy. The production feels a little low. Setup and teardown is a pain in the ass because you have to shuffle so many decks of cards and then split them all up when you're done. And the difference in characters, at least in my opinion, didn't really feel different enough. The cards they start with they sort of just felt like color swaps of the characters I already played the last time I played. But I think this and Ruins are the absolute like peak of his card crafting system. This is shaping up to be right up there among some of my favorite solo board games. It's a great solo playing experience, and despite the lack of depth in the characters themselves, there's a good amount of replayability in this box. When you play, you kind of feel really powerful, despite the fact that the game can be pretty damn hard sometimes. It's a satisfying experience with lots of like chain reactions and some wicked synergy if you pull things off correctly. Yeah, I'm digging this one, and I'll be doing a bit more on this in a future video where I'm gonna just go through like some really quality solo games. But for now, I would give Unstoppable a solid A. Yeah, this is a great game. And that about wraps it up for this year's end of year tier list video. Thank you so much for watching. This has been a really good year. It hasn't been a great year. Like I don't have a ton of S tier games, but it's been a really good year. Let me know in the comment section what games you think just like blew your mind. I don't think there was a lot this year that blew my mind, but there was a lot of really, really solid games. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for the donations from Mork, Steven, and Lewis. I appreciate you guys. It's really, really helpful, especially now. Just full FYI, might as well do it now because we don't do like vlog style videos. I have been laid off somewhat recently. It happens, I work in the tech sector. It's just part and parcel with the way things go. So any any little bit just definitely helps. Thank you for sticking through this entire video because I know it's a long one. And let me know in the comment section if you think I should be like reducing the length of these videos, because I don't know if people enjoy these types of like long ass videos. But thank you very much for watching. Merry Christmas. We'll see you in the new year. Bye.